Hello and welcome to the B&B show. My name is Brandon. This guy over here to my left, that's of course Brendan, Seahawks, Brendan Nelson to you. My man Brendan, how you doing, man? We're
Yeah,
moving
it's
along here in off-season.
we are almost to one of the most exciting months of the off
Oof.
season. We are just about there. So I that considered am doing pretty good.
There's something about the draft that's magical, isn't there? And the adding players, the potential of, especially when we were on the heels of just a couple of years ago, we had one of the best drafts we've ever had in our history, and how you can see how that can take a team and dynamically impact them in such a positive way, and the returns can be sometimes even immediate with even with the young
Mm.
guys. And so it's just a great time of year for all the potential that can bring, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's like Christmas for everybody. And then when the season starts, a lot of your presence ends up breaking down. A lot of teams end up dissatisfied with their presence, but on Christmas it's still great, right? You don't know it's going to break down in a couple of months.
That's right. I mean, there may be socks in there, but it looks like a video game cartridge to me right now. So I'm just going to take it for granted that it's that.
Right?
Well, we've had some little bit of news before we're going to dive in today. We're going to continue a trek of shows, and me and Brendan are happy to announce today as well that between now and the draft, we will be giving you guys double the B&B. That's B&B squared to you. So you'll be getting B&B on Tuesdays and on Thursdays, as we're going to be diving through the individual positional groups of this draft. We want to keep them separated and keep them in a place where, we can just kind of lock in on each kind of group as we go down. So we're going to be going through the line today on the tight ends as we did the quarterbacks last week, tight ends today. We do have a little bit of news, mainly kind of NFL type news, but a little bit of Seahawk news as well. Brendan, get us kicked off on that.
All right. So, in terms of Seahawks news, it's been very quiet. Things are chill, which you would expect. We don't have any money left. So, there's nothing much to do in free agency, and it's just that time of year where there's not much to say. We did get some positive updates about the health of Abe Lucas and Uchenna Nwosu, both guys expected to be ready for week 1, which is in the case of Nwosu, I was expecting it. I didn't get the sense that his injury was going to be a long-term thing. But Lucas has obviously been touch and go for a while now, so it's good to hear that he's okay.
Yeah, you'd expect if they were unsure about the surgery, right? They'd be giving us like, we're going to take him through his process and his rehab process, and we'll see where he's at as we get into training camp. You might hear something like that on the other end of it.
Yeah. And they did say that Jarek Reed, they're not so sure about being ready for week 1, but he does have a good rehab so far. I don't expect him to be ready for week 1 anyway, so I wasn't really expecting that. So we got that going on. Other than that, man, it's mostly just stuff to do with the NFL as a whole, right? We got a couple of interesting rule changes. It feels like the league usually doesn't change this much in one off season. I don't know if that's true or not, but it doesn't feel like it. So there is some new stuff we got to talk about for this season at least.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a variety of different places on these things too. It's some thumbs up, some thumbs down.
Yeah. The big change right now is probably as it regards to tackling in the NFL because number one, this is obviously going to have a very big impact on games next year, but also because this change kind of stems from a Seahawks game of last season. The hip drop tackle has been banned or is in the process of being banned. So they're getting rid of it. And basically, the hip drop tackle is kind of like the horse collar tackle, except you're grabbing them down below a little bit more. But the action on the player is kind of the same in that you're pulling them back and their legs get bent underneath them. And it causes some of the same types of injuries, which is why I think they did this. They looked at it and they're like, well, if we got rid of horse collar, we're going to have to get rid of that too for the same reason. So that one's definitely going to be very, very impactful on this season, I'll say. So it's going to be controversial. How do you feel about it?
I hate every part of the rule. I think that the number of injuries that are being stated that came from it are being overstated by the NFL. A little bit like how remember how they gummed up the numbers a couple of years ago on the kickoff stuff, where we had 13 of these major injuries, and then somebody went back and actually tracked the number of injuries, and they're like, there was only 6. How did they get to 13? So I think the NFL is once again in this situation cooked the books to get this in the place that it is. What are we asking these defenders to do? Like, how are they supposed to come up with a feather and put it up in front of the player before they tackle him and then set him on top of the feather? They can't go high, but don't go low, but don't grab us here and then wrap on this, but then don't go with the horse collar tackle. Like, these are grown men that you have to bring to the ground, and you're trying to do it physically. And you start to get to a place of don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, where it becomes kind of an impossibility. And you pair this up, Brendan, with the fact that we've watched across the NFL over the past at least 5 to 6 years, there being a steady decline and drop off in tackling. So you already have an issue in the sport where your product is being diminished at least very slightly by the fact that your tackling has started to been reduced for a couple of other reasons. And now you're going to further kick that out even more. I can't say that I understand it. I think that the players sign up for physical risk when you play football. And if that's a shock to NFL players, or that's a shock to fans that that's the way it is, well, I don't know what to tell you. That's the way it's always been. So I don't understand this whole every little way we're going to try to put bubble wrap on the walls so that these guys don't get hurt. It's football. This is the nature of the beast, and I think we'd be better suited to embrace it rather than continually turning away from it until we can eventually turn it into flag football, because that is where this will eventually go, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm torn on it personally. I have kind of conflicting thoughts here. On the one hand, I do respect the fact that they're probably trying to look at it the same way that they're looking at the horse collar, because again, the action is very similar. On the other hand, we're also running into this very clear problem of the defenders can't really do anything anymore. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's definitely gotten to the point where it's just gone too far in one direction. And it kind of feels like, because last year was a pretty good year for defense, right? Like, defenses in general were playing better than they have in a while. Mm-hmm. Kind of feels like this is a little bit of a response to that, maybe. Could
100%.
be, right?
I 100% think that this is the NFL finding a quick, easy method to draw the scoring back. How do we get the offenses another benefit here to them? And if safety is the big concern here, Brendan, why haven't cut blocks been done out of the game? I've talked to multiple defenders. I've talked to men who've played in the NFL that will tell me that those cut blocks are as dangerous a thing for defenders as anything you'll find out there that happens to them. They don't give a root and toot about that. They don't care about those defenders getting those chopped off. Listen to Chad Brown talk about how the Broncos used to chop him in half coming out of there with their zone blocking schemes and how brutal that was on his knees. So it just doesn't add up. There's a lack of principles, it feels like, on this. It feels like they're sort of applying it where conveniently to want to apply it. And it seems like, to your point you just made, kind of interesting, it always seems to skew towards the offensive protections rather than really any defensive protections.
Yeah, I agree with that. Most of these rule changes do favor the offense. They have for a while. This goes back to like Bill Polian talking to the NFL about enforcing pass interference rules back in, 2004. Mm-hmm. Like, ever since then, it seems like we've just been kind of headed down this road. And again, I'm not completely without some sympathy to the situation, because again, the hip drop tackle creates the same basic effect as the horse collar, which has been banned for 20 plus years. But at the same time, I'm wondering, how are these games going to look now? I mean, for this first year, there are probably going to be a lot of penalties, right? Because players are just going to do it. They're just going to be like, I'm used to doing this. I'm just going to do it and keep getting penalties for probably a couple years.
Oh, well, there's a few things there to really quickly unpack. First off, I think it's hard to make the comparison to the horse collar tackle. The horse collar tackle is, I am past you as a player. I've gotten by you. You're reaching out now after you've gotten past me, grabbing onto a part of my jersey to pull me back and rip me back into, where you're doing kind of like a Hail Mary tackle on me that's going to get me injured, and very likely to, because you're just pulling with that weight all the way back in that way. If I have a guy like the video that we're showing, Brendan, is the Andrews with the Cincinnati Bengal linebacker coming up and tackling him last year, and they're saying, see, this is the big emblematic example of why this is a bad tackle. It's a different kind of tackle from the horse collar. I'm coming up at the side on a guy. I'm not coming up behind. He hasn't juked me and gotten past, and I'm jumping out Superman style to grab him on the back of his horse collar. I have a guy I'm coming up to the side of. I'm 6'1", 6'2". Andrews is 6'6", 270 pounds. How do I bring that guy down? Like, just think about and I've been on a football field when this has happened. So I'm also, this is one of those rare moments I'm knowing what I'm talking about. You're walking up to a guy bigger than you to tackle him. How the hell am I supposed to get him on the ground? Yeah, you want to try to ideally wrap and roll them on the thigh. That's the whole hawk tackling technique. But when it's live action and you're running full speed on a guy to get him, you're just trying to get your hands on him and hold him up. Sometimes your body might fall on the back of his legs, but it doesn't mean that that's what you were setting out to try to do there. It's just that it's hard as hell to bring a man that I'm giving up 50 pounds, 60 pounds to down to the ground. And I think that's where you put the defenders in sort of a no-win situation here. I get the horse collar one because it looks dirty. It's dirty. It's a guy being beat on a play and sort of getting rewarded for that and what he's doing. This is not a play where a guy's been beat. He's just coming up from an odd angle where if I'm not heads up on you, I'm very much in a position coming at the side to have to make this kind of tackle. And it's just naturally a part of football. It's a natural kids out there that are 12 years old that are out there in the grass playing tackle football. You're going to see these kind of tackles, especially if a smaller guy's trying to take down a bigger guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that the intent on the part of the tackler is very different from horse collar to hip drop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying it kind of has the same effect on the player being tackled. So I understand that they might look at this and go, okay, we need to do this because the effect on the tackler is the same. I don't agree with it, of course, but I'm just trying to say I think I understand where they're able to defend this from.
Yeah.
I guess. Like,
you're right. It can cause.
I think it's a mistake, but I agree
with you. It can definitely cause major injuries. And like you said, we had with Gino last year and probably was hampering him throughout the whole rest of the year. Or Andrew's injury, which basically, I mean, he came back, but he certainly wasn't 100% when he came back later on the year. But to me, that's also a bit of that's the NFL. And there's a bit of that's going to be in this game at all times. That's unavoidable when you have a high impact collision sport like this one. That's kind of the nature of the business a little bit. And it sucks. And I'm not happy about it. And I wish there was a way there was better protection of it. But to me, it's not. Let's pull down the rule book so far to the point where we're going to try to eliminate every injury in the book. And then at that point, ruin our product on the field, which I feel like they're heading again with some issues in tackling already up into this point where we have times where guys just straight don't tackle in this league anymore. It's only going to grow as an issue. And you brought up the officials, which is another part of this, Brendan. Let's add more subjectivity for the officials. Yeah, that's what the game needs. It needs more of those officials. Week by week variance. What's the rule? Who knows? Do they know? No. But we're going to watch that bounce back and forth like a ping pong ball every single week on what gets called, what doesn't get called. Oh, it's this call. It's this week, and that way. But next week, it won't be that way and this way for that. Lord, we did not need to give the officials more subjectivity. And now we've also given them on top of it. So that's, I know I'm going on a rant, but it's just, I'm very much on this one. Like, this is not going to end well.
Yeah. I'm not excited to see this upcoming season in that regard because again, the players will not have adjusted. They're still going to be doing hip drop tackles constantly because that's what they know. So I could see this rule change being a very short-term one. I could see it being like the reviewable PIs, remember? 1 year and out. It could be like that. But if this rule sticks around for a while, I guess one thing we need to take away from this is supercharge your offense, right? Build your offense up because defense just got that much more hard to play. So build up your offense. Try to score 40 points a game because that's where the game is headed.
Especially big guys, right? There's big guys that are hard to tackle now. The method that the young, smaller guys would take to try to tackle them, try to go for more of that. And again, I see a little bit in the chat. I'm not saying that the player's product health is product KK9. What I'm saying is that there's a product on the field that you're trying to play with, and it's been a product to a certain year that's played in a certain way. You change that product and you lessen it, you water it down. It makes that product worse. That's not about the players. That's about the overall, what you're doing on the field itself, what you're showing to your audience. And when guys can't tackle anymore, it's going to make your product worse. And if it makes your product worse, the game's in a worse shape at that point. Do too many of those rules, you make the game worse.
Yeah, there are other sports to play. There are other sports you can go play if you don't want to be put in that situation. You know?
100%. Tons of non-contact sports where you have to deal with this. Is nobody's forcing any of these guys to go down this road and line. You know, it's comes down to it's like you get the officials like people talk about with these pro players sometimes, Brent, like they've been like gladiators, you know, like they're forced by their chains out onto the field to go play or something. It's like, no, it's a completely voluntary deal here.
All right. And one other rule change that I want to spend a moment on. This one affects the game in an interesting way as well. They're going to the XFL kickoff where the kicking team will line their coverage unit up on, I believe it's like the 30-yard line, the opposing 30-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kick receiving team lines their guys up like 10 yards away on like the 20-yard line. And then the ball gets kicked off and nobody can move until the ball's caught. And basically it's going to create a situation where you want your kick returner to be like one of those old Denver Broncos running backs, one cut and go. Because if you hit your one cut and you go, you're gone because there's nobody going to be back there. So that's going to have a very interesting effect on this game, I think.
I'm actually okay with this one. I didn't really want to see the rule kick change from a couple years ago done in the way they did, right? Where they, remove the kick up and then now you can just fair catch it at the 2 and you get it to 25. Like you basically took it down to like an auto play. Remove the auto plays from the sport, remove the PATs from the 2-yard line, remove what's going to be just a fair catch on 95% or a kick through the back end zone on 95% of the kicks. Let's bring back into plays actually having an impact on the game. And I think that this is what this rule does, Brendan, is versus where you just had the rule at versus having at 2-yard line, 25. This actually provides us some action. Yeah. And I kind of like it from that perspective. I think it could be fun. I'm thinking there could be an inventive coach out there, Brendan, that like finds a way post snap to, like post snap blockers pulling back across the formation in space kind of thing, pull back around this way and then lead them back. And I bet there'll be some special teams coaches that get kind of inventive with this. And so this part could be kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to add some intrigue to a play that hasn't been intriguing for a little bit here, it feels like. I do wonder what's going to happen when teams start doing like the end around where they have one guy going one way and then they have one guy looping back the other way and he gets the ball on a handoff. Like that guy's just going to be gone. Like if he's fast enough, you're not catching him. So you're going to see some teams maybe start to drop some of their guys back as soon as the ball gets caught. You're going to see it's going to mix things up in a way that I think is actually good. I'm pretty excited about that.
It's going to be such a challenge for the defending teams, like to your point on that, because when you're naturally coming down in the kickoff, everyone's got their lane. So, it's very easy for those special teams coaches to be like, okay, lane. And then we read where the kick returner is. And then we kind of slowly close like a fist around him, keeping our control, right? Keeping the edge control. So he doesn't have a backdoor escape at any point. So it slowly closes around him. You're already starting out kind of with the width, aren't you? Where it's like the rather than the fist being kind of closing, the fist starts wide open off the kickoff.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, I think end arounds and pulling guys and schemes, you could provide a lot of difficulties for that they don't have any easy answers for, especially like you said, if you have that right kind of kick returner of the old school type that could be the just really fast, get up to speed, basically Percy Harvin. I mean, if you get a Percy Harvin type back there again, it's like, good luck.
Yeah, D. Eskridge, your job might be safe after all. You might be
there
okay.
You go. D, we got you a spot, man. We found you a place.
Yeah. The NFL got rid of the surprise onside kick, which only happened like once a year anyway, so that's not really much of anything. Yeah. I think they said they're going to add another game, like an 18th game in like 2031, I want to say.
Okay.
So we don't really have to think about that yet. And I think that's about it in terms of like football related news.
Yeah. So they're waiting until the next CBA to get because the Players Association wasn't going to agree to that in the on the new CBA. So that's what that says to it.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. So I think that kind of sets us up to just get right into these tight ends here because it's been a quiet week.
Fantastic. And I've got the banners ready on my side, by the way. So I'll pump through on my end of this. All right. But yes, so we've got an interesting spot, Brendan. Let's set the stage just a little bit here as we look to these tight ends in this draft where we have, let's do a couple donos here. So let me not disregard those if I can. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, I just wanted to wish you two a fantastic show. See what you did there, man. Very clever. Yeah. Very clever. Thank you for the $2 donation, man. Appreciate you, Kevin. I hope you're having a good night. I hope you're having a fantastic night, my man. Oh, I doubled down. Jordan, thank you for the $10 donation. I appreciate you for that, Jordan. Hope you're having a great night too, brother. Says eventually we're going to have to get to a place where players like DK won't be special. Their size won't matter because their physicality can't be used to defenses not even able to touch them. Eventually we're going to get to a place where players won't be special because their size won't matter because their physicality can't be used due to defenses not being able to touch them. So I think he's saying sort of like things will shift to where the rule book for offenses will be that they can't, you know.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think players like DK will always be special. I mean, good luck bringing that guy down now. I mean, it was hard before. Guys like Debo probably gain value too from a rule change like this, right?
I would think. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so I don't know if I agree with this. I think that DK is going to be just fine with this one.
I think, and maybe to the nature of, I think what you're building in your question, Jordan, is that the offense will suffer from some of these ails that the defense is suffering from, as far as these protections are concerned. That now the defense will start to get some of these protections. I think that's what you're inferring in your dono, which is possible. But let's also remember with this, Jordan, that if it's to help the offense out, that's a good thing from the NFL standpoint. More scoring is never going to be a bad thing for them or something that they'll turn away from, and then, like I was making the point of a little bit with like the cut blocks, which they've kind of taken some of that out a little bit at times, but not all the way. And it's like, if they're really, worried on that type of stuff to provide some balance or give the defense a little bit of like, okay, we're protecting the offense a little bit, let's protect you guys a little bit. That would be one spot that you would look to maybe do that in, and they don't. So I feel like, Jordan, just from my perspective on this, the commissioner's office, the NFL tends to be a little bit more of like, we'll treat the offense with kid gloves, and the defense, we throw you outside. If there were two different kids, you got the helicopter parent with the one kid, and then the one kid you just throw outside with a fishing pole, and they're like, just head down to the lake, just get into some trouble, whatever, you'll be fine.
I know what you're talking about. But yeah, I think DK will continue to be special for quite some time. Very rare you find that combo of size and speed.
Yeah, it would take a rule change at this point, because that's like Brendan said, these guys are just hard to find at that big, moving that fast, that strong. All right. Well, thank you for the donos, you guys, on that. We're going to start off this today. So today we're doing tight ends. On Tuesday, we'll be doing running backs. So every show we're doing here, kind of going forward for the next month or so, we'll be looking at a positional group in this draft. And today we are looking at tight ends, which may not look on the surface, Brendan, as a position that we would look to select from in this draft, given that we just signed Noah Fant to a 2-year, $21 million deal, and you signed Pharaoh Brown on a 1-year deal. But I might say this. The Seahawks have tended over the last 10 years to more often than not have 3 tight ends on the roster at any one given time. You only have Pharaoh Brown on a 1-year deal. The Noah Fant deal, while it's a 2-year deal, is one that does give you a way of getting out from under the deal after a year from now. So there is a lot of potential still opening here for you to go get a young guy to bring into the kind of the spectrum on this. Do you feel that as well?
I would say so. I think that it was obviously a lot more interesting about a month ago when we had just cut Will Dissly and we had no tight ends on the roster. It was obviously a lot more interesting then, but I think that Ryan Grubb has shown that he is a guy who will adapt to the personnel that he has. And if he's able to get a really nice third tight end on this team, he will find a way to incorporate him, just like he did last year. He was a 3-receiver guy 2 years ago, and then last year McMillan gets hurt, so he's like, okay, we're doing more 2 tight end stuff now, and it still was great. The offense was still excellent. So I do believe that if he got another quality tight end, he would find a way to incorporate him. A lot of these tight ends are going to be guys who line up in the slot a lot anyway. And you're going to find creative ways to use guys. If you can find the right amount of talent, that's the goal, right? As a coach, work with what you have. And if what you have is 3 really good tight ends, that's what you should be using. So, yeah, I'm still open to the possibility of drafting a tight end at pretty much any point in this draft if the opportunity is there.
I am as well. Because again, I think you don't necessarily have a long-term solution plan in there. And if you're going by a value-based draft, if that's the case, and a guy from a value-based standpoint sitting there on the board is the top guy there for you on the board based on just who's the best guy on our board. Well, it's tight end. Well, you got to make that call to say you're still drafting from value at that point. Because that's why I say, Brendan, the value meeting a little bit of need is always a beautiful place. And I think the one guy that starts us off in this conversation that helps to provide a bit of a light into this quandary, Brendan, in that this is what we're going to potentially be facing with this kind of situation that comes to us, being that you go through the first round. We now have Michael Penix today running a 4.46 40. Congrats to Michael. Great to see the Husky out there doing it on the pro day. I think he's solidified himself finally here into the top 20 and very well now could be solidifying himself inside of us in the 16. We're looking at a really good chance at this point, I think, of 5 quarterbacks taken and maybe even 6 quarterbacks taken before we select at 16. which will push down certain players in this draft who many had thought would be picked far up ahead of us. This first guy we're going to kick off here at the tight end position is a guy not many people are forecasting to the Seattle Seahawks, Brendan, but there is a pathway, is there not, with the way that this draft could unfurl for us in that opening 15 picks to where he does fall for us, and that is Mr. Brock Bowers.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Brock Bowers, in my opinion, he is right now, as of right now, going from college to the NFL, probably the best tight end prospect I've ever seen. That's not to say he's going to be the best tight end ever, but as of right now, as a prospect going into the NFL, I don't think I've ever seen somebody quite like Bowers. I'm thinking about these other ones. Kyle Pitts, who isn't even really a tight end anyway.
Right.
TJ Hawkinson, Eric Ebron, Vernon Davis, probably one or two other guys that I'm forgetting as well. To me, this guy has them all beat. And I think that he is a put it in the bag, just lock it up, forget about it, star at this level, and probably a superstar. I think that Bowers is going to be very quickly one of the best tight ends in the league and will probably end up being the best tight end in the league at some point. I love this guy. Some of the big boards have him dropping off the top 10. The aggregate has him 11th. I don't get it. To me, this guy, not only is he a generational tight end prospect, I think he's a top 5 player in this draft.
Yeah, I think the part that makes it weird with this for teams and him drop is that you have the quarterbacks being taken heavy up ahead of him in this draft, which pushes him down first and foremost. The second thing that pushes him down potentially is the cost. If you take Brock Bowers at 9th overall in the first round, he's automatically on an average year per basis being paid one of the highest salaries in all of football at the tight end position. One of the things that you tend to like to get when you pick in the top 10 is you're getting a really talented player on his rookie deal that you're not paying him up in one of the top high-end marks in the NFL at that position. You're getting some cheap, cost-effective control, which you don't necessarily get with Bowers if you take him. And I think that's another thing with those. It's that 1-2 factor there, Brendan, right? It's the 5-6 quarterbacks and then that little bit part of the cost thing pushing it over. You know, do you want to go with a Fawanga who you get in, who gives you great play at right tackle from day one, who's on a lot cheaper of a salary than the top end right tackles being paid in this league? Or do you want to go with the Brock Bowers that you're paying at that? You know, it's a bit of, I think, the tricky part with him and where he does end up landing because of that. But I do agree with your assessment, by the way. I think, to me, I don't know if he's the best tight end prospect I've ever seen in my life, but it's definitely, when you look at the recent ones you listed off, Ebron, TJ Hawkinson, to me, he's better than those two guys. Vernon Davis was probably the best overall with what he brought out and just size, explosiveness, everything's all together. But Bowers put up better tape, I think, than Davis did coming out. And he's been a guy that Georgia, I mean, this has been maybe their most important player on the team that won the 2 national titles. He might've been their most important guy out there.
Yeah. 3 years he's been producing at a high level. He would have had 1,000 yards last year if he didn't get hurt. And if he didn't get hurt, Georgia probably wins the national title. Let's also not forget that. They were clearly the best team in the league and then just didn't show up against Alabama. Bowers was probably still nursing the injury stuff for that game.
100%.
So, yeah, if Bowers doesn't get hurt, he might go through 3 straight years without losing a single game at the college level. I think, right? Because they went undefeated the previous 2 years.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he accelerates quickly. He's great yards after the catch. The yards after the catch stuff is incredible. In fact, a lot of Georgia's offense is just get the ball to him in space and let him go to work.
Oh, they run him as an end around. Like they made him the fly sweep end around guy.
Yeah, he's a great route runner, great hands. He's a good inline blocker, although he's a little bit undersized, and I think that he can improve as a blocker a little bit. I think he can get better. He's got great ball skills. He's got a nice catch radius. It's not huge because he doesn't have the super long arms, but it's good. High effort, lines up as a wide receiver, lines up all over the place in that offense. Just a really, really awesome player. Most of the stuff that you could consider to be a issue with Bowers would be stuff that can get better. Like, I think he needs to become a better blocker, but he can do that. He's got a limited route tree because of how Georgia used him, but he could become a better route runner. Like, it wasn't because he was a bad route runner. He was just being utilized in a very narrow form in Georgia, I think. He didn't have a lot of experience getting pressed at the line of scrimmage because of Georgia's offense. If he has to face that in the pros, he might struggle with it, but that's just because he's not really used to it. It might take him some time. So, yeah, I can't imagine a better tight end prospect than this. I am a big Brock Bowers guy.
I'm the same. I think that the blocking assessment's a fair outlook on him, where it's not necessarily a monster in that role. He does well enough. He's really, he's certainly much further than a guy like Kyle Pitts, of course, on that element first. Like you had said, Kyle Pitts being just a receiver coming out and what he brought. Excellent body control, and ability to just be falling back, still make the catch, balls behind him, make the grab, one-handed catch here, one-handed catch there. He's got, like you said, the catch rate is going to be huge, but what catch rate is the ball does come into, he's making the grab. A great contested catcher as well. He's your typical tight end that can be hammered and still make the grab as he's being banged around a little bit on the inside in there. But I love his upside. Brandon, the question's going to be the key one on this one. This is what really breaks down the bottom line, I think, for people on where your assessment's going to be with Bowers and how you really do like him. Is you're sitting at 16 and you've got Brock Bowers there, and you've got, let's say you've got Brock Bowers there, and you've got Mims there, and you've got Jared Verse there. Yeah, let's go with those guys. Let's say Fatan was off the board, 2 tackles off the board. That's done. You don't get to pick that. Who are you going with? How much are you in on this Bowers action?
I think if those are the options, it's pretty easily Bowers. I think it's easily Bowers. To me, Bowers should be a top 5 pick. If you can get him at 16, that you can't miss on that.
I feel very much the same way. I have a hard time with it when this guy, because I think both of us just, our assessment of it is this guy's a special guy in this draft. He's a blue chip guy in this draft. And I've maintained that you get an opportunity to take a blue chip guy at 16, you got to just jump on that guy and you'll make it work. Find a way to work down river.
Yeah. To quote Phil Knight about Michael Jordan, just play him at center.
That's right.
Like, get him on the field, play him at fullback. I don't care.
Find a way.
Find a way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the Bowers hype is legit, folks. He's been getting a little bit of, he had that one photo where he was standing next to, who was he standing next to? Gronk. And everybody's like, oh my God, he's so much smaller than Gronk. Just turn on the tape, though. Turn on the tape. And like Brendan said, with Gronk wasn't looked at some grade A prospect coming out. He's a very good prospect, but he had back issues. There were some questions about him with the productivity wise. Bowers a lot better state coming out as far as how he's viewed as just that status goes. So love this cat, though. He's great.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
All right, let's move to the second one. This guy's actually dipped down to me. I don't know if you've got him as your number 2. He's dipped down to me as my number 3, but let's talk about him number 2, number 3. I think they'll be between these next 2 guys. There'll be a little bit of difference opinion on a variety of people on that one, but it's a guy we got to talk about. I think the Hawks have met with this guy and talked to him at the combine. That's Texas tight end Jatavian Sanders.
Yeah, I like Jatavian. Obviously, before the season started, I think he was graded out as like a late first rounder, and then he bumped down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't have the great season that some people were hoping for, but he did significantly improve his big plays. He did make more big plays. He had I think his yards per catch went up from like 11 to 15 or something like that. He's in an offense with 2 stud receivers, so his numbers are not going to be crazy. I think that needs to be understood. He's playing with Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you're not going to put up monster numbers if you're Jatavian Sanders, but he's a great athlete at the tight end position, makes plays after the catch, can make plays downfield as well, can make plays deep down the field. There is some versatility in how Texas lined him up. They were lining him up in line. They were lining up in the slot. He's got great ball skills, I think, really good in contested catch situations. I know he had a bad combine, but I watched him test, and he kept slipping on his 40s. I think he's a lot faster than those 40 times indicate. So I'm not really worried about that. I don't think he knows how to run a good 40. He knows how to run on a football field. Yeah,
he's not 4.69 on a football field. He's legit like closer to more of a 4.55 guy on the field with the speed you talked about, Brendan.
Yeah,
that's one of the big things he brings to the stage.
Yeah, not much of a blocker yet. Doesn't have a lot of strength in his like technique with his hand placement when he's blocking isn't where it needs to be. So he is going to be, at least at first, a little bit of a Jimmy Graham type of tight end, but he can improve. He can get better. And we've learned you don't have to be a stellar blocker to still have a lot of success in this league at tight end. Plenty of guys do it. So I mostly like what I see here. I think he's got a decent amount to learn, but I like the athleticism. I like the talent. I think he'll probably I think this guy has a good chance of being better in the pros than he was in college, because in college he felt like an afterthought in that Texas offense, because 2022 it was all about Bijan and Roshan. And then last year it was all about Worthy and Mitchell.
And they still had Brooks last year too.
Oh yeah, Brooks. Yeah, Brooks too. That's a good one. But I will say this: Texas mostly used him in line, and at the NFL level, he might have to be used more in the slot because of his blocking issues. So that'll be an adjustment for him. But I would definitely be willing to take him in the second round in a vacuum. I think he might be a first-round caliber player who just didn't quite produce enough to get there in practice. But you might end up getting a first-round caliber player in the second round here, maybe.
I think it's a fair assessment. I do think, to your point, if not a slot, he's going to be an H-back at the next level. So this is where if I think if we're going to be drafting a guy, it can be a guy that does some H-back stuff, but also is able and capable of doing inline stuff. I don't know if he's a good enough blocker to do inline stuff at the pro level. I think you're going to have to kind of protect him a little bit. The physicality off, that's everything the H-back position allows you to do, is avoid the physicality at the line of scrimmage, because you get the free releases like you get in the slot. So I think he's got to kind of fit more to that role. He's a willing blocker, Brennan. He sticks his head in there. He ain't like one of those kind of soft guys that doesn't want to try to, make it happen. He does. He's legit 245 sometimes going up against those guys, 260, 265, giving up 20 pounds, and he just can't do it. Really, really athletic. Really athletic. The contested catch skills you talked about, I think, are certainly a big part of what he does. But you just feel, for a tight end position, his body move, the way he moves, is just a little bit more athletic than you get from some of these guys at this size. It's really fluid. It's just really easy movement, not a lot of wasted movement. I do like his skill set a lot. I would have been maybe open to taking him more in that. I think he goes second round. I would have been more open to taking him if we hadn't have gone with Fant at this point, because I think that gives you a little bit too much redundancy there versus needing a little bit maybe more of that inline guy. But he'd be a fun guy in the Grubb offense, and no doubt Grubb would find ways to get him in space and freed up. He gives you some yak too, just a little bit.
Yeah, pretty good yards after the catch. So yeah, I think it's a lot less interesting now, but I'm still going to be aware of the fact that he's a good player, right? Like, just because we may not necessarily want him doesn't change the fact that he's got some nice qualities.
I think the first round thing you mentioned is completely apt. The lack of use, or it's not a necessarily run heavy offense in Texas, but they spread the ball all over the place, and he could very well become a better pro than he even was in college, and he wasn't a bad player in college. So definitely a worthy second round grade on Jatavian, no doubt about that. Got a couple donations here. Garth Knight, thank you for the $5 donation. It says, does Drake May have 9 1/4 inch hands? Not the best to sling the rock.
Yeah, they are. I think 9 1/4. I think that's right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm checking my deal on this if I got it here, but yeah, I think 9 inches is the bare minimum of the hands the pros want you to be at, is at least 9 minimum. But you are on the smaller side, and this could be. Let's see who we got. We got New England there at number 2. Does this dissuade New England away from him more to the bigger-handed Jaden Daniels?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of buzz that Minnesota is going to trade up for May, and they play in a dome, right? So it's not as big of a deal.
Wow. I was hearing they were on JJ McCarthy. Have they pivoted away, just realizing, no, it's not about McCarthy?
Well, everything's smoke at this point, right? Everything's smoke. But I have heard the Vikings are looking to trade up from May, and New England doesn't like May that much, so they're willing to do it theoretically. And then Washington gets Daniels, and of course, Chicago gets Caleb.
Right.
So then that would be like McCarthy maybe goes to a team like the Broncos, or Nix goes to the Broncos. McCarthy goes to, well, maybe a team like the Raiders takes a quarterback. So
how about the Giants at that point?
Yeah, the Giants also. So the trading stuff makes things really tough to decipher, because we know there are going to be trades. There are definitely going to be some trades up. But
we got to talk about something too, by the way, right now. There's something that you and I got to discuss.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
What's going on with the elbow?
Oh, man, I haven't seen that before. Oh, wow. Is it like the Randy Johnson thing where it looked like his arm was bent backwards when he was throwing?
It set the internet on fire yesterday, man. Is
I
it
missed this.
this set that somebody this in I think it was Schefter posted the picture of this and it became a complete like it freaked people out. They were like, what is going on? I
Yeah.
mean, the more you look at it, the scarier it gets. And I had to bring it up to
Yeah.
you because I had to know what you thought. Like,
I mean, yeah, yeah, it makes me think of the Randy Johnson picture where it looks like his elbow's bent backwards, but in reality he's just it's just because he's throwing the ball with such force, the picture makes it look like it is.
totally. He's even got the Kirk Douglas dimple in the bottom of his elbow, dude. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So yeah, small hands, 9-inch hands. That's the minimum, Garth. But it is also one where if you're a team indoors or a team that isn't in weather conditions, you're not going to be as worried about that. Which may be why if we go see Drake go to a southern team or a dome team or a team in controlled climate conditions, that might make more explanation why they went for him versus New England, who's in outdoor. Maybe New England's like, we got to have a little bit more of that Penix 10-inch hands thing going on.
Yeah. So with this new information, do you think that Schneider still loves Drake May?
I don't know if he's a hand queen. You know what I meant by that. No, I don't. I still would maintain that I think with Drake May's size and ability, I don't think the hands would override this enough with it. But I don't know, man. It's just it's hard to know with John if he. I mean, he went with Russell too with a guy that's smaller. So John might very well say, no, Caleb would be my guy if I had a chance.
I
It's
would
hard.
hope that he prefers Caleb over anybody else personally. I would like to know, not that it matters for us at all because we don't have that pick, but I would like to know that my GM is smart enough to recognize how good Caleb is.
I think so. I do think though that if you took a poll between 32 teams in this league, Brendan, that I think that there'd be three columns of answers between Daniels, May, and Caleb. I don't think it'd be like 20 teams would be Caleb and 8 teams would be Jaden Daniels and 3 teams would be May. I think you'd have a little bit of a separation there, oddly.
Yeah. You're probably right. I just don't totally understand why, I don't understand why.
I think these teams just have different values they place on the position and what they look for, and that they're really wildly different in what they put the value on. This is how we see a guy like JJ McCarthy maybe sneaking up into top 5 state of things. It's just like, he's a winner. He's a leader. He's a guy that just in the room, people gravitate. When he walks in the room, they gravitate towards him. Gravitate. It's electric. It's like, it's all this kind of stuff.
I mean, they did win a game against a really good Penn State team where he didn't throw a single pass in the second half. So when you think about it, I mean, you got to be doing something special to push your team to a win if you're pulling that off.
He was under center so smooth, man. He was handing that thing off. Nobody hands the ball off like JJ McCarthy in college football in 2023. Okay, nobody. Yeah. Michael Penix wished he could hand off with the style and substance that McCarthy utilizes. Thank you though, Garth. I appreciate you for that donation, and we'll see if the 9-inch hands gets him knocked out of New England, Garth. Maybe that'll be the single factor that gets them dissuaded from taking him or trading out of that pick. In Minnesota, I don't know what the hell. I'll tell you this: if Minnesota trades up to go for a May or a Daniels, I can at least understand that versus them going up from 11 and trading up into the top 5 to take JJ McCarthy, and then giving up a future first-round pick to take JJ McCarthy in the top 5. That to me is Bananarama. That one I can't understand at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Bo Nix that much, but I don't know why you wouldn't just stick and take Bo Nix. Like, to me, he is better than McCarthy, and I don't know what you're getting with McCarthy that you're not getting with Nix personally.
That's a good point, especially because the draft capital you have to give up to do it. I don't understand. Jordan, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that, Jordan. He says, sorry, to clarify, I meant if it gets to flag football route. So if defenders can't tackle, what is the point of being so physical? And Jordan was, of course, above with this don't know for the DK one about that one. Thank you for the clarification on that, Jordan. And you're right. I mean, if it gets to the flag football spot, it will be all about quickness, speed. That's all the game will be about. not just simply that the onus is on that or that's where that kind of leads to. It will all be about that. What will be the point of being physical at that point? It will all be gone. And there's none of it you can really do. Or if you can do it at such to a minimum scale, it's not worth trying to measure at that point.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Definitely some truth there. Hard to get
So,
around that general idea. Hard to see the league going in any other direction.
yeah. It's one reason we're digging our heels in so much to try to pull back from it happening, Jordan, because it'd be lame. It'd be lame. This is a Metcalf size and physicality and players like that of that ilk is a part of what makes this game great, on top of the players that are fast. And that's a part of it too. You wouldn't want to eliminate that anymore. You'd want to eliminate the big size. I mean, that's the matchups of styles and stuff. You get the teams that are big and just driving the teams that are fast and finesse versus power. And well, why remove that part of it? Just another layer to kind of peel away from the game that doesn't need to be peeled away.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for the clarification, Jordan. And I think we're with you 100% on that. No big boys after that point. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that, Kevin. Thank you for the double donation, I should say. It's your second one tonight. Says, I get cornered into drafting the same damn 6th round tight end in every mock draft sim. Eric All, Iowa, freshman year, played at Michigan. Mike McDonald should know him. Thoughts? Well, we can skip a little bit over to Eric All right now. He's definitely on our list to cover tonight.
I got him way down here. Give me 1 second here. I got him. I do remember looking at him. Okay, here we go. I got him.
All right, let me get Kevin. Let me get I got your dono. Thank you for your dono. Let me get the stats up for him here. Where do I get? Oh, he's not tested yet. So in these guys you won't see. I'll just have the arm length of the what they tested out of the combine, but they didn't run any tests of the combine. So we have to kind of where I can provide it, I'll provide the testing scores, but where there's not, I can't. So go ahead and you start off first on his question, just with your thoughts on Eric.
Well, he's got pretty legitimate size. He's over 250. He weighed in at 252, 6'4", 33-inch arms. So the measurables are pretty legit for a tight end. He stretches the field vertically pretty well. He's got some ability to stretch the field in that way. Runs pretty good routes. Lots of yak, lots of yards after the catch. Blocks well in space, not so much in line, but I do feel like he's a good blocker in space. He's explosive coming out of his stance. I don't think he'll ever be much of a blocker in the trenches, so he might be another one of these guys that really struggles to play in line. He's already been injured a lot in his career. He missed half the season last year. Drops too many passes. Doesn't really have great top speed. He gets up to his top speed pretty quickly, but overall he is kind of slow. He doesn't seem to have a great grasp of zone defense. Like he does that thing where he kind of glides into the coverage rather than sitting down in the hole. Physical press coverage gives him a headache. And that's what I had for notes on Eric All personally.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate to what I've seen from him as well. Again, to your point on that, 3 games played in 2022, 7 games played in 2023. So there's an injury worry here with him that's going to ding him into, I think, the 6th, 7th round, no doubt about it. He's got kind of a patented move where he runs that little 45-degree angle out route, and then he cuts it back inside to a slant, and he gets open kind of at will on that route whenever he wanted to run it at Iowa. I think Brendan's assessment on the blocking is also true. He can get to block in space, but if you put him at all heads up on the line, he's not going to get it done. There's just not a lot of blocking ability heads up to make it happen at all. There's not the technique. There's not the strength. There's not the power. There's not the nastiness to him to go get it done. It just isn't there. He's also got a weird habit to me, Brendan. He's always the last guy off the line of scrimmage on every damn snap. You know, like everybody's into their routes, and then he's the guy that like, oh, hike. Oh, okay. You know, like, yes, let's go. You know, you're kind of quick. Utilize it. It nullifies his quickness a little bit off the line of scrimmage because he's always that last guy off. And I'm like, dude, come on. Darrell Taylor used to remind me of that out of Tennessee. So it's like, you're always the last guy off the line. You're super uber quick, but if you're a beat slow off the line of scrimmage, your quickness it's nothing. You might as well be a 1.72 10-yard split guy at that point. He is dynamic with the ball in his hands. He quickly does turn into a runner after the catch. He's got kind of that pad level of a running back when he runs the ball in his hands, which I really liked. But I just do think your assessment of physicality through the route gives him a ton of, if I if I lay one little hand on him through the middle of the route, he's, does one of these moves and he has a hard time getting back into his route. He can't deal with it. It's not even press. It's just, if he comes through his zone and the guy hits him a little bit, he's just completely thrown off his spot. So to me, he is a 6th, 7th round guy. He's got some good physical stuff he brings, but just not enough there.
Yeah, I have him in the 7th.
Yeah. I pretty much on board put him 6th, 7th. I go, to me, it's ubiquitous. You put him either way on that ones with it, but he's got a little something to work with, but too many holes in his game to go much higher than that point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you though, Kevin. Zen Lunatic, thank you for the $10 donation. Says, one rule change I hope works out is they can now review roughing the passer penalties. Don't know if it'll help, but some of those calls have been horrendous.
I mean, isn't what would happen just you throw the flag, they review the play, and then they never change the play like they did with PI? Like they just didn't want to admit they were wrong, so they always let the play stand. I kind of feel like that's what would happen here.
That would be my worry too, Zen Lunatic, is that we did get, when they had that reviewing of the pass interference penalty, they would just, and remember it was a pride thing, Brennan, right? It was like the officials and all that dealt with it like, you're challenging our ability to call this on the field. We will not review these. We will not reverse these calls later on for it. You're questioning our, like, how dare you question my authority? It's like, and I don't know if they would do the same thing here, but I do think that they've done that road. They've gone down that road once before. Why wouldn't they do it again? And I do like the fact that it gives them a little bit of review. I like it. I just wish and hope, Zen Lunatic, that it would be honestly applied, being that they would truly look at it when they see, oh, look, his hand never came near his helmet, so let's wipe it off. Versus, well, I don't know. You can't really tell. Maybe the finger like glazed the side of his mask as it came down. So, maybe we just got to call that, we don't want to back our guys. Got to back our guys. Got to back your guys. Just get the call right. That's what you got to do. So I hope so, Zen Lunatic. But let's see how they truly do review it with it, and if they are honest with it. Unlike how they were with that pass interference review thing, which was just, I don't understand why they got so prideful about it, Brendan, but they did. They just didn't. They're like, no, we're not gonna change it. F you. They put a big middle finger up anytime a coach threw out the flag for it. We got it once though. We did get a reverse in the Steelers game.
Yeah, I do remember that. I think that might have been the only reversal.
It was.
In the entire league.
Yeah, I was like the only one. It's pretty crazy. But thank you, Zen Lunatic. That one, I'm okay with that one. I'm okay. And officials having more, for oversight over the top of them is not a bad thing, especially with all the subjectivity in the rule books. But that means you've got to actually have oversight. It isn't just there as a figurehead role to be like, well, I'm here, but I'm not actually going to do anything. I'm here for appearances.
Agreed.
All right. Well, let's keep, and Zen Lunatic, thank you for that donation. Very kind of you. Let's keep on going down the list here. We're actually going to go to who is technically right now my number 2 tight end. We had Sanders there first, but I'm going to go to this. The guy's going to be my number 2 tight end. I think he's a pretty complete one at that. And I think a guy that's probably risen up the boards as much as anybody through this post-draft process at the tight end position. First, where he started, Brendan, where we looked at start. And that would be Ben Sinnott out of Kansas. Tell me a little bit about Ben Sinnott.
Well, I think you're right. He is bumping up those big boards. I think that by the time we get to the draft, he will probably be a 3rd round pick. Right now, the aggregate has him in the 4th. I wouldn't be shocked if he went a little bit higher, but I think he ends up somewhere in around the 3rd round. Top 100. I think he does end up there. But really, really good testing. The testing numbers were pretty extraordinary. The speed is good. The acceleration is great. And he killed his jumps. 40-inch vert. 10-foot 6-inch broad. And what that measures is explosiveness typically, right? Like when you look at somebody who's able to jump that high and jump that far, it's about the explosiveness in your hips. So him being able to do that tells you that he's extremely explosive. His change of direction is crazy. He ran a 6.823 cone, which is one of the best times ever for a tight end. And his 20-yard shuttle was also very good. Productive last year, 50 catches, almost 700 yards, 6 touchdowns. Good athlete. He's a playmaker. He runs all kinds of different routes. He's got a nice little route tree. He runs good routes, got great hands, gives great effort to bring in everything that comes his way, makes good things happen, yards after the catch. Pretty good blocker as well. Not a great blocker, but a pretty good blocker overall. He can line up in the slot. He can line up in line and do it all fairly well. He has a good understanding of how to sit down in the holes against zone, which is again, that's something that we come back to sometimes. Some of these receivers really understand how to read zone and go to the right place to be open against this zone defense. And some guys just kind of drift into the coverage. I do think that he could pick up some muscle to become a better blocker. Sometimes he looks a little bit slow on the field. He doesn't look as fast as his 40 time indicated. And man coverage does occasionally give him a little bit of a headache. But overall, yeah, this is a relatively complete tight end. And I understand why he's bumping up boards so quickly.
Yeah, I do think he's going to end up being a top 50 player when it's all said and done in this draft. I think Sam Laporta's success last year really helps this kind of player and this kind of prospect, because if you look at the testing numbers and the productivity coming out, I think that there's some very, very similar points between the two players. I liked him a little bit more than you did as a blocker. I found him to be a great all-around blocker. In fact, I think he's one of the stronger blockers in this draft, and both as a pass protector and as a run blocker. I think his technique is great. He's awesome as a receiver as well. He gives you, it's kind of like, to me, this is why I liked him a little. This is why he's jumped above Jatavian Sanders to me, is I think he gives you everything Jatavian Sanders gives as far as contested catch skills and route running goes. Jatavian's a better yak guy maybe, but he gives you so much more of a blocker to me, which is why he elevates a little bit more further above. But I think that he's going to be able to be productive from day one, a good all-around tight end that can play in line. I like the way he avoids contact off the line of scrimmage as well. He's got a little bit of elusiveness and dip to him to avoid contact and stay into his routes. We just talked about Eric All, a guy that from Iowa, just if you get any contact in him, it's not just that it disrupts him, it brings him to a standstill. And so if you have a route based on timing and the quarterback's expecting to go to this read here at this time, by the time I hit my back foot, and you're still a yard off the line of scrimmage because you've gotten pressed to death, well, that's something that's a big skill to have, because the NFL level teams are going to try to disrupt your routes, especially the tight end position. So I like what he does there. What you said about him sitting down in zone, I think is very apt in his ability to read zones and find those open spots and not rush on into it and rush, just keep progressing in through, because, well, the play told me to go here. He'll kind of read on the fly and sit, but gluey kind of hands as well. Just good overall skill set to me. And I do think he'll be the number 2 tight end taken off the board in this draft.
Yeah, it could be. There are these late risers, like, the Sam Laporta thing that you said was a pretty good example, potentially. I could see that.
And he did go in the second round. I just think that does, sometimes these guys, you're always looking for the comp, I think at times, not me, but I think NFL teams are looking for comps at times. And if you have a comp like that coming off a year, and this guy so closely aligns to that guy down the line, I mean, if we brought up the numbers, I think they'd be right on top of each other, including even the vertical leap, which was like Sam Laporta's big thing. I think was he had a big 39-inch leap or something like that too. So, but love seeing it. He'll be a good player in this league, and I would have no problem taking him, because I think he's got the high floor to me. I don't know if he'll have the ceiling, but I think he does have the high floor on his skill set. All right, let's go to another guy here that you've been high on. I'm going to skip over what our list was and go to, because I think I was higher on one guy here than you necessarily were. So let's go to the next guy who I think would be on your list versus mine on this kind of stay congruent, which would be a kid out of Ohio State, kind of lost in the shuffle here a little bit, Brendan, a guy that you liked in this process very early on when we first started looking at these prospects a year ago. And that would be Mr. Cade Stover.
Yeah, Cade Stover, kind of a meat and potatoes type player, right?
Like meat and potatoes with no salt or pepper, man. Just put you put on
admittedly,
the pan.
There's a place in the world for players like this. You need players like this. 6'4", 247 pounds, so the size is pretty good. The combine performance was good for what he is as a player. You knew he wasn't going to run like a 4.4, 5.40 or anything like that. You knew he wasn't going to jump out the building, but what he did was fine. Very productive the last several years for Ohio State. And we got to remember, Ohio State's had the best receivers in the country. So you're not going to put up big numbers as a tight end because there's only one football. You're playing with Marvin Harrison Jr., you're playing with Chris Olave, you're playing with, what's the Jets guy?
Boga.
Yeah, what's the name of the guy who went to the Jets?
Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson, yeah. JSN. So you're not going to put up monster numbers playing tight end in that offense, but over the last 2 years combined, about 1,000 combined yards, almost 80 catches, 10 touchdowns. Really good route runner. He's got really good hands, wins most of his contested catch situations, uses power to get yards after the catch. He runs with a good amount of power, actually. And I think that the potential for him to be a really good blocking tight end is there. He's not completely there yet, but I do think he's better than a lot of these guys. We talk about this sometimes where the tight ends that come out in the draft these days are just not that good at blocking. And I like the fact that he usually lines up in line. I think that's a skill set that is starting to go away. Every year I look at these tight ends and I go, man, all these guys do is line up in the slot. I want some guys who can line up in line. His catch radius isn't that big. He does have a history of playing on defense. I think he started out as a defensive end at Ohio State, so he's a little bit raw. And his aggression level as a blocker is a little bit wanting. So I think he needs to become a more aggressive blocker if he wants to become a truly great blocking tight end. But I really like this player as somebody who's got a very high floor, but a somewhat of a low ceiling because he doesn't have explosive athleticism. But I think he'll be a good all-around tight end. I think that he will be somebody who offers you a little bit of everything that you're looking for in the position. And I would take him in the third round pretty happily.
Yeah, he's a guy for me that's been a little bit more of a I have him technically in the third round. I sure would like to be trying to get him more in the fourth round because I just don't think there's as much sizzle there with what he brings. It was good to see the 1, 5, 9, 10-yard split where there's a little bit of get up and go from that 10-yard spot of it. If he doesn't have the speed, at least he's got a little bit of that. I like the shimmy and shake and his route running to get free. The power, like you talked about, is there, though he does have a little bit of a tendency to get cut down because he's relying on power. Teams know it, so they're going to just try to chop him down, which he doesn't have the ability to kind of get, to juke or get around you lateral. So it's just he's more it's kind of a slow moving target to chop him down in that way, which bothered me a little bit. I liked his blocking, like with the last guy we talked about, maybe just a little bit more, and found it to be in a good enough shape for some of these blockers in this tight end class that are not good at all. So compared to some of the guys in this class, he's Gronk almost compared to some of them with it in certain respects. But another guy with really strong hands in a draft filled with a lot of these guys, especially all these guys we've talked about at the top of this, with the exception of Eric Hall, but really strong hands, a good contested catcher too. I think a little bit like Sinnott there, where he can be banged around in the catch. Those tight ends, they've got to be, I think one of the skill sets that's really prime for a tight end, Brennan, is you're not getting a lot of separation. So you've got to have the ability to make the catch and be able to take instant contact after the catch and not have the ball get dislodged. A lot of receivers we see have this problem where if they get a little bit of hit after the catch, the ball's going flying. He does a good job of bam, catch is made, hit, hold it, fall. Like he'll cradle that thing up and do whatever he's got to do to make sure he reels it in. So not a lot of sizzle for you at this tape, Brendan, but he's solid. And you can't argue with the fact that he's going to be an NFL player he'll find his way to get on the football field, at the very least as a blocker who you can fit as your second tight end, and maybe a guy that eventually rounds out to being a starter for you.
I can get behind all that. I will admit that I would be a little less in on the idea of spending a third round pick on him now that we don't really have a need at the position.
Yeah.
When I was evaluating him, I think a big part of it was just like, we're going to need tight ends. I'm willing to take this guy in the third round because I like him. I do wonder if at this point it might be a little more wise to wait for the third or fourth, excuse me.
I think that there's a big argument to be made, especially because there's not maybe a big drop off from him to once we get into these fourth, fifth round, right? Tight ends, on that side of it. Keeping this going, let's move on to the next guy here. I'm going to do, before we get to Tip Ryman, we're going to go with Theo Johnson. This is a kid out of Penn State who has been one of the workout warriors. Is he the Mike Mamula of tight ends in this class?
I don't know who else it could be. No one else tested like this. This guy tested incredibly well. And it seems like Penn State does this every year, don't they?
Yeah.
Like Penn State does this every year. They've got these players that didn't really do that much in college. And then the player goes to the combine and they're like, wow, this guy's a freak. Why didn't he do more? Yeah. Like we even had that a little bit with the Chop this year as well. Like he's not even the only Penn State player this year. But it feels like PSG, I think Adisa, like Micah Parsons.
Adisa Isaac is too in this draft. I think he's in that similar place too. The other edge on that Penn State team.
Yeah, that sounds right. So 6'6", 260 pounds. He's got the legit tight end size that you don't find all that often anymore. Jumped out the building, ran a 4.57 40, which is 91st percentile. Great acceleration. 20-yard shuttle was on point. He's a phenomenal athlete, and with all that athleticism, he's managed less than 700 receiving yards over the last 2 years combined. It's just one of those things where I guess he doesn't really have a quarterback, right? We know that. He doesn't have somebody throwing him the ball. But at the same time, like where's the production here? There are tight ends out there who have produced a lot without having a good quarterback. Iowa never has a good quarterback, and Iowa churns out a good tight end every year.
I felt like some of the issue with Theo was that he was aligned out too much as a wide receiver and an H-back, and he's more of an inline guy in where he should have been aligned, and that so now he's out there trying to beat cornerbacks in coverage versus taking on linebackers at times in coverage or safeties in coverage. And the mismatch he needs to be fitted to, I think, is more trying to get him into the linebackers and have them stay with him, especially because he's such a guy that's so hard to me deal with on the stem of his route when he makes his break. He's one of the better tight ends in this class at being hard to read about where he's going with that break. And is it cutting out? Is it stopping? Is it cutting the right? You're kind of in a guessing game when you drop back in coverage. But that was the weird part that I saw from him, Brendan. You look at his size, you look at just his build, you go, okay, that's an inline guy. But so many of the snaps I was looking at, he's especially lined out as a wide receiver. It's like, this is not Jimmy Graham. I know the testing numbers are good and probably similar to what Jimmy put up, but it's not the same kind of player as far as route running and creating separation off the line.
Yeah. So what did I have here? Runs good routes, wins in tight coverage when you throw him a go get it ball, knows how to use his physicality, pretty good blocker, good hands, but needs to improve as a blocker, I think, especially in the run game. I think he needs to get a little bit better. There's some issues finding the hole against zone coverage. That's something that I end up locking onto a lot with these guys. He's another one of these guys who kind of drifts into the coverage rather than sitting down in the hole. So he's got a long way to go, but there's immense potential here. Some people are elevating him up into the third round. I can't quite get there. I'm not there yet. I think he's a day 3 guy. I'm close. I'm tempted, but this feels like bait, right? This feels like bait. Like the testing scores are just trying to suck you in, and then you get him and you realize you can't actually really play football that well.
I would be very worried about, and I've got both the last two guys I talked about in the third round, Stover and Johnson, but I think the more I think about it with them, and this is why I like to wait till the last day to get my board right, I think with both, I've got to dip them into the 4th round because the production is just not quite there enough. I do think the blocking is going to come around. He's got good bend for 6'6". He understands getting into the leverage. He hits really nice with his strike point as a blocker. He's got the size and the strength to get it done there. It's something you can feel just needs to come along a little bit more. Like he lays the initial block, then he gets thrown off the block. So he just needs to learn how to sustain it better as much as anything else. A lot of immense physical potential here, Brendan, but just, you do feel like to be taking that in the 3rd round, I want more certain productivity behind it to feel good about that. But no doubting they don't come like this, built like this, testing like this very often. Does feel like a trick, though.
Yeah. I fall for the combine warriors a lot, and I'm trying not to.
Me as well, especially with this, because this tape is not bad, but it's not exciting, right? Like
right.
and you, like you say, it gets hard because you're like, yeah, but the quarterback. I mean, and that's valid. I mean, that's a valid thing, right? It's been rough there with who's throwing the ball. So you go, okay, there's that, but it doesn't seem like enough of an excuse, does it? It seems like there's maybe just something a little bit extra missing there on that side.
Right. I mean, but again, it's the Penn State way. Yeah, you're not going to be productive in college, but you're going to find that extra gear in the pros somehow.
It's true. It's true. And some of these guys, like with Micah, like you said, with Micah, same thing. You have certain guys that they are just workout warriors. I think Adafe wasn't he that way with him? Penn State didn't know Adafe have some crazy. It was him or Rousseau. Was it Rousseau? One of those guys a couple years ago out there, Penn State had some insane, just absolutely insane one. And it was like, he didn't, I think, round out whichever guy that was, but
yeah,
Micah did.
Remember who it was?
You remember, right? There was one. It was a defender that had some insane testing thing that he did. I forget which guy, but he was like just.
I can't remember the name, but I know who you're talking about.
It vaulted him to 1st round status, pretty much, that workout. Well, here's a guy I'm going to be interested to see your opinion on as we move to the next guy. This is a guy that's launched up my board. I don't know if it's gone as high up your board. I'm guessing probably not, because I'm kind of jumping on this one a little bit. You know what I mean? This is one of my guys, maybe for me, that is kind of fit to that route. And that's going to be Tip Ryman, which is kind of a tight end name. Let's face it. That's a tight end name out of Illinois, Brendan. Another, to me, just an interesting prospect in this draft.
Yeah. He's got that tight end size and then some. Like, you won't find a bigger tight end in this class. 271. 271. If he added 15 more pounds, he might be able to play tackle in the NFL.
That's right.
Honestly. His measurables are big and he tested really well. 4.64 40, 1.55 10-yard split. And I don't think it can be overstated how impressive that 10-yard split is at 271. Like that's off the charts. The vert was okay. The broad was really good. The 3-cone was really good. He tested out excellently. And he was somebody who was not really getting any attention until that combine, really. I don't think most people knew who he was until he measured out so big. And part of the reason is because he was not productive at the college level. He had about 400 receiving yards over the last 2 years combined. And that's just going to weigh you down a little bit. But he's a team captain for Illinois. He was one of the leaders of that team. Extremely strong, going to be a great inline blocker. Big catch radius. When you get the ball in his hands, he runs with power. He's got to work on his route running. I don't think his route running's all the way there yet. His technique and blocking, like his hand placement and his footwork, needs a little bit of improvement. He's got a low ceiling as a pass catcher, I think. I do suspect at the end of the day, he'll never be like this isn't going to be a George Kittle situation, but he's definitely intriguing. He's definitely got some qualities to him that you don't find with most other players. It's not Darnell Washington, but it's kind of like Darnell Washington almost, in that the production wasn't there for some reason, but you look at the play and you're like, wow, there's something way more here.
I think it's a fantastic comp. I really do. I think for me, he's a little bit of like the Luke Musgrave of this draft, not in the way that he had injuries following him coming out of the draft, but a guy that we might see get taken a lot higher in this draft versus where the production that you just referenced was seen. And not just because of how he tested, Brendan, which is going to be a part of it at the 4.64, the 1.55, 10-yard split, all that. But I think when people look at the tape with him, they'll see, okay, he's in a run-heavy offense with Illinois. He's not being featured very often. It's not good quarterback play there at Illinois. I mean, it's the trifecta for a guy trying to, try to get his share of touches. On 25 targets this year, he made 19 receptions throughout his career. When you throw him the ball there and the few times they have, he's made the grabs. I do believe that he is the second best blocking tight end in this draft behind Barner. So I think that that's a legit skill set that he brings to the table. I think your assessment about some of the technique stuff can be cleaned up, but I think as far as the ability to just be I got 33-inch long arms, I'm 270 pounds, and I'm going to take this edge for a ride. He's got that ability to do that. And I think that the upside on the pass catching, I think, is a little bit more higher for me than it is for you, because I believe that his lack of production didn't come from his inability to get open, but because of the fact those other things we just mentioned, the nature of the offense, the nature of the quarterback position, just what they were choosing to do on the other side of it. But I love his physical potential, and a guy that I will vault up in the third round because I think he gives you a complete set at the skill set at the side and position, and I think his upside is legit. It's one of those things to me where we saw Musgrave last year go in the second round. It's a guy on tape that had, I think, 31 total catches in his college career, but he tested really well. Wasn't anywhere near the blocker of this guy. And I think in Musgrave was like a 4.55 guy or something like that with his 40. So I would not be surprised if Ryman ends up being another guy who ends up going higher in this draft. Like I think Sinnett's going to be a top 50 guy. I believe that Tip Ryman's going to be a top 3 round guy. Whether it's us or not, I think it's somebody else will take him because of what he's bringing to the table. You're muted.
Yeah. I couldn't quite get there with Ryman. I have him in the 4th, though. I do think 4th feels right. Couldn't quite get there in the 3rd, but I mean, he's fun. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Yeah. You don't find players like this that often anymore. They don't make them like this. Usually all these tight ends, like we got tight ends this year that are like 225, and they're, hoping nobody notices them try to sneak into the tight end line.
Yeah. And you mentioned it, to get to the 1.55 10-yard split with 270 pounds that you're rocking, for some of these guys that we go back to Jadavian Sanders, for instance, who's carrying 245 pounds, right? He's a 159 guy. And that's supposed to be the get up and go guy. And you mentioned he had a hard time running his 40 and all that, which is valid. But I think it just indicates again, just how much Tip is, like you say, 1980s lineman with 2024 athleticism. And that's for the position. And that's what I think, to me, had him so unique for me, I guess. That's got him so rising. Mm-hmm. We'll keep it moving here. Let's stay on in what's right in that fourth roundish range and take a look at a guy the Seahawks have also met with at the combine, that being Jaheim Bell, a little bit of an undersized H-back tight end out of Florida State, Brendan.
Yeah. I remember we talked a little bit about Jaheim Bell before the season started. Seminole, going to be 23 when the season starts. Let me see here. Yeah, this is a smaller guy, 6'2", 241. So he is tight end size by modern standards, but not by a lot. I mean, you're pushing it a little bit when you get down to 240. The testing numbers were stellar, although they kind of need to be when you're this small, right? Like if you're going to be 240, you better run the 4.61.
Yeah, you
right?
better.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least he did that. He had a relatively productive year last year for the Seminoles. It kind of felt like one of those things where every game he just produced about the same amount. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's like a baseball player who just goes 1 for 3 with a walk in every game. He never has that game where he goes for like 4 for 4 with 3 home runs. Every game's just like 1 for 3, 1 for 3, 1 for 3.
Yeah.
I don't know. It felt like every game was just kind of like, yeah, that's okay. Played running back in 2022, which was kind of interesting, right? He was had like 73 carries for the Seminoles offense. So they found a creative way to use him there. I don't know if that's something that Ryan Grubb would be interested in, but it's certainly different, right?
It's possible. I'd be open to it, especially with us, fourth back roll come in, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. He's good in coverage. He's got good ball skills when he's going for contested catches, maximum effort. He's got some versatility, good athlete. But he is undersized. Like I said, not really a good route runner. I feel like the way he uses like his steps to get open, it's just not very deceptive. And I feel like he's going to struggle to get open against man coverage. Blocking isn't there, and at his size, probably never will be. And his hands are kind of, I don't know, he drops easy catches to me. So I honestly, 6th round, I don't even know if he's going to be able to make it at the position in the NFL. I'm not super into this one.
Yeah, he's a guy that's dipped down to my boards the longer I've gone on my process of looking at Jaheim. Before we get to what he does as a pass catcher, which you just mentioned, the run blocking is atrocious. So the blocking is not there at all. So that's something that you have to kind of lead with, because I don't know if that's coming along anytime in the future. Now, as a pass catcher, Brendan, I think he's probably the best yak tight end guy in this draft, except Bowers. I think Bowers does have him beat. But is that a fair assessment, would you say?
Bowers hasn't beaten what? I'm sorry, you cut out there a
Yak
little bit.
yards after the catch from the tight end position.
Oh yeah, Bowers is incredible in that regard.
But Bell will be number 2 probably in this draft for tight end.
Let me think here. Let me give that some consideration here, because I did think Sanders was pretty good with yak stuff.
That's true. I think Bell's got him beat just a little bit though. I would put Sanders as my 3, but
I mean, like the running back stuff does kind of give you. Okay, I guess I can get behind that. Okay.
Which is weird. You mentioned about he is a little stiff, but then he also finds a way still to break tackles by being, which usually those stiff guys can't get as lateral and be kind of jukey and, be able to sort of just kind of just dip and get away from guys. He does that while still having kind of stiff hips, which is weird about him too. I don't know what it is. The contested catch stuff was right. Not a natural route runner. Maybe that running back background is an explanation for it, where he's a little bit new to the position, undersized in addition to it. There's some problems here and there's some good stuff. I almost feel like maybe he's got to be a hybrid guy, Brendan, where it's a little bit of running back, H-back type stuff that you utilize him from. And then maybe you can find some value with him as a 2-for-1 kind of guy. The Hawks maybe don't have to go get a 4th running back because they have Bell in the roster at that point, and
okay, I dig that part of it, but I wonder if he'll even be a tight end at the NFL level on some regards. Like he might be a receiver. Like he's undersized. He can't really block. Like what if he ends up just playing receiver at the NFL level, basically like full-time slot?
Well, it's possible. The only issue there is I don't know if he's sudden enough. I mean, he'll have to lose probably 15 pounds or something to kind of slide into there. So, and then is he good enough as a route runner to do that on that? He's kind of stuck in maybe too much of a tweenerville. Is that maybe the bottom line assessment here? Is we've got just too much of a tweener?
Yeah, he's stuck in the middle.
Yeah, stuck in the middle, man, and Joker's to the left of him. That's to the right.
Yeah, every year there's a few of these guys. It's like we'll get to this guy in a future show, but Marshawn Nealand, Like, he's a little too big to be an edge, and he's a little too small to play inside. I feel like you got to pick a path here, buddy.
Yeah, you got to have something you can do that's not just a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You need to be a whole lot of something, which is, I don't think Jane Bell's a whole lot of something outside of maybe a little bit, a whole lot of yak, but that's not enough of a skill set in itself to draft you in that first round. You might have talked me into dropping him down my board further, because I think I've had him I think I got him in the 4th or 5th round right now, but I need to be dipping him down too as well. I need to be a lot more brutal on these tight ends in this draft, Brendan. I've been too nice with them.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't that many that are interesting, right? So how can you not be?
You're trying to talk yourself into it. You know what I mean? Jeffrey Thistle, thank you for being a member of I don't know if the Hawks Nest or yours, one of our two, I think maybe both, but for 22 long months, thank you for that. He says, I'm excited about seeing our players in an offense and defensive scheme that wasn't written in crayon. Think we're going to be sneaky good. P.S. F the M's.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see the defense without Clint Hurt and Pete Carroll's fingerprints on it for sure. I still don't think Waldron did that bad of a job. I do think Grubb has an obviously much higher ceiling than Waldron did, but I don't know. I think most of the problems that Waldron had last year had to do with the offensive line never getting to where it needed to be.
I think it is both sides of the ball. I think you're right. Defense probably gets the better impact of change coming into play, but I do think the offense gets a benefit that's not even Waldron with this, Brendan. It's just that for instance, utilizing outside runs. I'm doing a video that I'm putting together right now. I'm going to release tonight on Walker, and I ran some of the data off PFF, and I took the last 2 years, and I looked at the runs for Walker outside of the tackle boxes, right? So those runs where he's out running, not inside from tackle to tackle inside those tackle boxes, but when they actually let him work on the outside, he had 36% of his runs in his rookie year were to that outside place, 40% last year. Now that doesn't sound so bad, Brennan, until you look at the raw data on the yard per carry average stuff. On the runs inside of the tackle box, he averaged I think it's 3.8 yards per carry. On the runs to the outside, it's 5.3 yards per carry as far as the difference goes.
Yeah, so I mean, that's his game. It makes sense.
That's his game. And so you're going to use him out there. I got to think, I know the Huskies didn't target the middle of the field very much in college football last year, but I got to think that Grubb's not going to take us from 32 back to 32 again last year. So even if you go 32 to 24, there's still going to be some substantial returns by just going off the back end on that side of it too, I think.
Yeah. And I really think it was a Penix thing, not attacking the middle of the field more than a Grubb thing, because if you look at Fresno State, they use the middle of the field a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't think that's a Grubb thing.
And then that's when you had Jay Kaner. It was a little bit more, we got to kind of overcome the arm strength stuff here a little bit. So, okay, feature more in the middle of the field. Yeah, that's, right. I agree. Yeah. But thank you, Jeffrey. I think we are hyped up for those reasons as well. And I'm going to be all Seahawks this offseason here. I ain't doing much Mariner stuff this year. I'm kind of like, I'm good on getting outspent.
I'm actually pretty excited for the Mariners this year. I like what they did this offseason overall. I think they were able to find ways to improve the team from last year, and that's all I can ask for at the end of the day.
I hope they do good. I do hope they do good. It's hard to watch teams getting to outspend them by so much money, though, man. It is rough to watch. Garth Knight, thank you for the $10 donation. Appreciate you for that, Garth. He says, I understanding judging a player by the hand is ridiculous. I will say that if a family member told me that Jamal Adams was their favorite player at any point, I wouldn't trust him to navigate a crosswalk.
like a crosswalk to cross the street. Okay, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
I mean, everything they do to measure these players matters for something, right? Like even something like hand size, it matters. I think it all tells a story.
Yeah, and the thing with football is that there's so many years of coming to learn that this stuff matters. Like they didn't arrive. I don't think they woke up one day and they're like, you know what? We think hand size might factor into the quarterback position and da-da-da-da. I think it was from years and years of seeing guys with varying places of hand size, guys with big hands in wet environments or cold environments, versus others where you had the small hands guys in those areas. I go back to Dave Craig on this, Garth. This is one of those lessons you learn at a young age when I first started watching football. And Dave Craig, of course, I think at one point or another set the record in the NFL for the most fumbles in NFL history, I believe. And what happened with him is you could even see it in my young age of it. And they would talk about it in the telecast where he would take a blindside hit and he wasn't a big guy, and his hands weren't very big, and it would become just a collision issue where the collision would hit him and his little hands couldn't hold that ball in there, and it would just come flopping out. It wasn't that they tomahawked him or they tapped it from behind. It was that them knocking his body was enough to knock the ball out. And that was a hand issue. If he was in inclement weather, it got worse for Dave. If it was a wet weather, it got worse for him. You played in the Kingdom at that time, so some of it wasn't as on big display, but those hand size things are an important part of it. And, one of the reasons Penix was able to play as well as he was the past couple of years to me, Brendan, is those big 10H hands in wet weather are going to help you out to get a better grip, better traction on the ball, getting it out of your hands to better accurately place it in those kind of conditions.
Yeah. And by the way, I think the guy who broke Craig's record was Warren Moon in his final year in Seattle, in the NFL, which was actually in Seattle. I think I remember listening to the radio and hearing him fumble in a game, and the announcer said that's a new NFL record.
Oh wow,
I
didn't know that about Warren. I didn't know Warren had the issue with the fumbles as much.
Yeah, and then I think like Brett Favre passed everybody and set a record that's not going to be broken anytime soon.
Probably,
if I recall. Yeah,
Brett was wild with it. Brett was real wild with it. Mm-hmm. But no, I think I think certain players doesn't matter as much. If you're a linebacker, I maybe don't need to matter about your hand size as much with that. If you got the long arms, then fine. But if you're a quarterback and you got to hold on to this ball, and it's like holding on to a normal size ball. If you hold on to a Nerf ball, that's my thing about Penix is you like watch him hold the ball. It's like he's holding a Nerf ball. And anybody's ever had a Nerf ball, you can take that thing and have so much more control with where you throw it and how you throw it versus when you have a much bigger ball in your hand that you're trying to navigate with.
Yeah. I remember when I was a little kid, the commercial they had for the Nerf ball, the Nerf football with the fins on the back of it so you could throw it further. And they had John Elway throw it to see how far it could go. And he went, I think, 110 yards with it.
He had a cannon, man. And not many people remember that with Elway, but he had a legit, it's one of those guys you go back, watch the 80s tape and if he was a prospect now, he'd still be a prospect now. It was he had that kind of arm talent. So yeah, those little balls were fun. They tried to make it a thing a couple of years ago, didn't they? Didn't Russ have some special balls he was trying to make the new thing, or the Amazon balls that they had for a while there?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Look like little whatever things. So.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But yeah, you have more control with those. So the hand size matters in throwing a ball. It definitely does. Mm-hmm. Thank you though, Garth. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you, brother. Noah Lansing didn't have anything put in your chat for your dono, just your $5 super dono. So thank you for that, Noah. Hope you're having a good night as well. It's great to see you in the chat, brother. Coda Dad checking in from Canada. How you doing out there tonight, Coda Dad? Thank you for the $10 super sticker. Great to see you in the house too, brother. And I hope you're warming up in the great north up there. Slow but sure here as we get into spring.
He's probably, it's been we've had some nice days here the last several days. So
it was 2 weeks ago. There. We got a week of 70-degree weather. It was wonderful. I was like, this is amazing. Midwinter, 70 degrees a week. You just go out for walks for all day. It was great. It was so nice. Thank you though, Coda Dad. A little bit longer on that. It'll get you there. Eric Tams, thank you for the $20 donation, Eric. I really, really appreciate that for the big, huge dono, brother. You are very, very, very kind. You guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
He says, I really enjoyed the position breakdowns. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Definitely helps having that kind of feedback from you guys on this, Eric. This is the ever developing B&B show. We want to every year kind of get deeper and deeper into this draft process. That's why we started this up at the start of the year, to make sure that both me and Brendan on this would have guys that we've been not just catching up on in the off season, not just mad dashing to try to figure out, but these are guys that we've been tracking throughout the year because we feel like it'll probably add to you guys, both for the lead up here to the draft and also for draft day when me and Brendan are both doing our live stream, follow along what's going on. We're going to be able to have a lot more better understanding of our coverage. So we're always trying to get better at this, Eric, because we do feel like it's something that you guys in the audience will really appreciate with it. So we'll just keep trying to get better and better at it. But thank you, man. That is very kind of you to say. And we love doing this. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's keep it on. Let's keep it on moving to another one of my just kind of, man, Brendan, this is just a guy just liking this draft. This is just a guy. Another guy I'm interested to see where you stand with him and your opinion of him. Another guy that is a little bit like Tip Ryman. You got to do a little bit of imagination here with this guy. But we've got Michigan tight end A.J. Barner. as our
All
next.
right. I did look at him. Michigan, 6'6", 251, so legit tight end size. He can
Mm,
play in line, and he did. And he's an excellent inline blocker, and I think he can get even better than he already is. He's a hard worker who I think will maximize whatever little bit he can get out of himself. Like he's not going to leave anything on the table here. He's got long arms, which gives him this giant catch radius. He's effective working off script, which is a little bit of a rare talent. These guys who can keep the play alive when the quarterback's like running for his life, kind of like that Doug Baldwin thing, kind of like the Jordy Nelson thing, where a lot of these guys just don't really know what to do when the play just goes off script, right? But
That's
he
right.
does. Uses his size really well to win at the point of catch. He's really good at like the whole boxing out thing. So I like some stuff with AJ Barner. I do think that he will probably need to improve a little bit as a blocker in terms of like his refinement, like again, the hand placement stuff and maybe the leverage. He's not very fast or not very athletic, so he's never going to be some great game-breaking pass catcher. Not going to make plays downfield. He does drop the occasional pass as well. But yeah, AJ Barner, he's kind of like a traditional inline tight end. Clear value as a backup tight end in the NFL. And as long as you know what you're getting into here, I think you're going to be really happy with what you get with him. So I think I had a 5th round grade on him. I can't go much higher than that because I know the ceiling's very low, but I do think he will be a good blocker at the NFL level. And sometimes that's all you need to carve out a role for yourself, right?
Best blocking tight end in this draft?
I think so. Let me think here. Yeah, I guess so. It's either him or probably Tip, and I think he was better.
Yeah, I think he is too for me just a little bit. I think your assessment on that's pretty accurate down the line to what I saw from him, Brendan. 5th highest graded tight end by PFF last year. Very heavily used as just a run blocker by Michigan. So he only had, I think, 200 snaps that he ran out as a pass catcher last year to give some perspective on this. And that's playing in every single game. I think he's outstanding as a run blocker. He's not as good as a pass blocker, but watching what he did, for instance, I watched the Penn State game in particular with him that really stood out with me on him is watching him just dog walk Chop Robinson throughout the course of that game as a run blocker off the edge. I'm going, okay, you're taking a 1st round talent for a ride. I know that blocking is going to translate, I think, into the next level beyond also seeing it on other tape with him, but just really, especially there, I'm like, okay, it sort of clicked into me where it's like, this is going to definitely work. I think the Michigan, of course, you look at them as far as how much they're trying to throw the ball. And it's like, those 200 snaps that he ran as a pass catcher, is that just purely emblematic of the fact that he can't run routes? He's not a good, or is there some of that where maybe that's a bit of it, but then there's some of it just on that they're just not trying to throw the ball. And so it's going to be hard for any kind of pass catcher, be it a receiver or anybody to be very much featured in this offense in that way, to be able to really set yourself out. And that's why I like him so much. You're much like with Tip, Brendan. The draft is so much about finding guys of not where they're at, but where you find the guys of where they've been, where other teams can't quite see the imagination of where they will go. That's the way a guy like a George Kittle ends up going in the 5th round, where it's like, well, he didn't have the production. Well, he didn't have this. Things outside of his control are the reason he ends up dipping down the draft. But nonetheless, there's a real hidden gem there to be found at that point. And I'm not saying that Barner's a KJ Kittle type. He's not. But just that you might be able to find a similarly really talented guy that's a little bit, I think you're talking about, in the later rate, reaches this draft 5th round exchange, but still gives you great value at that point in taking him there.
Yeah, he definitely belongs in the NFL. He will have a job in the NFL for a while because he can block.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced he can ascend beyond that. I don't think his hands are all that good, and he doesn't really have the athletic profile to be a great pass catcher. But there is something to be said for just being a chain mover, right? There is something to be said for a guy who just kind of moves the chains.
He can if you ask him to sit down into the zone, sit between 2 defenders, make the catch, take the hit. He won't give you yak. He'll make the catch. Like you say, he can give you that. I trust in his ability to be a functional pass catching tight end, not a difference maker, but functional in that. And with being an upper level blocking tight end, I think that just, for on a rookie deal, that's a value to a team. You imagine bringing a guy like this out with Farrell Brown and 2 tight end sets when you want to go to a little run, like you could really, hammer the run game.
And George Fant is the 3rd tight end.
And George Fant's the 3rd tight end. You see, you're picking up what I'm putting down here. You know what I mean?
There we go.
There we go. I'm just saying that would be, you'd be heavy. You'd be going downhill on some guys, you'd be open to some holes.
Or are 4 tight end sets legal? Can you go Stone Forsythe on the other side too?
Sure. Why not? Why not? He's just gotta do the Detroit eligible blocker thing, man. Right? Just got to
Yeah.
report eligible. That's the key. Eligible.
Mhm.
Well, let's keep it moving here. I don't know if you've taken a look at this guy, but let's see if you have on this. Jared Wiley, TCU tight end, real big guy.
Yeah, I do have Jared Wiley on my list here. Bigger guy as well, 6'6", 249, legit tight end size, is pretty long arms. Tested well overall, ran fast, good explosiveness. Very productive last year, 500 yards, 8 touchdowns in a TCU offense that took a pretty big step back after their national title run the previous year. He knows how to use his size really well. Also, I mean, he understands how to win like jump balls and stuff like that. Utilized in line and in the slot, so he's got some versatility in that regard. His speed makes it really hard to keep up with him in man coverage. He's explosive. He's a good route runner. Great ball skills just in general, I think, and his technique when blocking is actually on point. So he's offering all these different aspects of playing football. I think he's a smart player as well. I do think he needs to get a little bit stronger. I do think that he goes down a little too easy after the catch. I do think he does kind of like get chopped down a little quicker than you would like. But I kind of put like a, open season as soon as day 3 starts grade on him. I liked him a little bit more than a lot of the big boards do. I would take him pretty much at any point outside maybe the top 120. And yeah, overall, I'd say I liked him a lot.
Yeah, I've got a 4th round grade on him, so it's an early day 3 for me as well with him. When I watched him move on the open field, I felt like I got a little bit of, and he's not Travis Kelce and yak. Like you said, he gives you no yak ability, but the route running like Travis Kelce, the utilization of the body, like a power forward blocking out a guy at times, they just know how to use their big body to keep the guy pivoted out. He's like a stretched out Kelce that's just not quite as dynamic in the open field necessarily, but I do like him a lot as a pass catcher. I like him as a guy. If you brought him to an offense like Detroit that runs all their option routes, he'd be a great type of guy who seems to have that understanding of how to turn off the leverage and find open space. Got stuck initially in his career at Texas behind the depth chart there before he did transfer over to TCU. And that's why you haven't necessarily had as much production from him versus it being a little bit later on, I think, which just to me gives you a little bit more of okay, there's some upside here. He was named the top tight end on the Senior Bowl of their American team. So it's worth noting that he's had a pretty good pre-draft evaluation process here and what he's done so far with that. Testing numbers are okay, 4.62, 1.62, right? There's been some other guys we've talked about, Theo Johnson and Tip Ryman, that have certainly outpaced him as far as the explosive numbers and the speed numbers go. But he's a pretty natural guy out there at the tight end position. And I think as an H-back at the next level for his pass catching and route running ability, I think he'll be functional and workable out there. I think he's a real willing blocker, Brendan, but I just did feel like he did get overpowered quite a bit. Like he was getting thrown around in there. He's willing, which to me, you talk about a guy going down and improving on something with the blocking. It's really more the willingness than anything else. Because you can tell on tape of these college guys that don't want to block versus those guys that at least were willing to put their head in there. They just got to get better at it. Colby Parkinson was a guy you watched at Stanford, and he just got tossed every which way but loose, but he was putting his nose in there. He was sort of taking his beating, so to speak, and paying that price. So I do like him in that 4th round range. I think he is more H-back guy. I don't think he'll be an inline guy when it's all said and done, but I think he can find his way onto the field as a guy, at least in pass catching roles in that way.
Yeah, okay. I can buy it too. I think we're both kind of on the same wavelength there approximately.
Absolutely. Well, keeping it moving here, another guy that we've looked at for 2 years, you and I, and we've been talking about him for 2 years here now, and a guy that is kind of flamed out a little bit here in his prospect. He started up here, and he's kind of just stocks just been trickling out a little bit. And that's Brevin Spann-Ford out of Minnesota.
Yeah, he's big. He's got some size to him, doesn't he?
He's long.
Yeah, he's got some stuff going on there. He was pretty productive in 2022. Another one of these players. And when I was looking at defensive linemen this week, I noticed that a lot of guys took a big step back in their production in 2023 from 2022. And this is another guy, not a defensive lineman, but he did take a pretty big step back from 2022 to 2023. His testing numbers were not very good. He tested below average, although he is bigger, so that's a little more okay. but I mean, he's not as big as Tip, and Tip tested way better than this, so that only goes so far. He lines up in the slot a good amount for Minnesota, and when he does that, he's hard to handle. I'll give him that. Like it's hard to know what to throw at him when he's lining up in the slot because he's so tall. He's a pretty good route runner. His technique as a blocker is pretty good, and I could see him becoming a really good like red zone player in this league because he's so tall.
Mhm.
But too many drops. He's got bad hands. That's going to hurt him in the red zone too. So he's got to improve that. Doesn't separate from man coverage because he just doesn't have the quickness that you would like to see. So you stick him with man coverage. He's not going to get open. He might still make the catch because he's so big, but he's not getting open. He moves awkwardly. That's the best way I can put it. He doesn't move smoothly. His play strength is not where it needs to be, even though he's a bigger guy. He doesn't really play like a big, strong guy. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here, and it's just kind of weird that he couldn't even get to 250 yards when he's got this big a physical advantage on everybody he's playing. Like linebackers can't keep up with this guy, and defensive backs and safeties are way smaller than him. He should be more productive than this, but he's not. So I put a 7th round grade on him. I'm just like, I don't think this is going to work out.
Yeah, another guy that's dipped down my board as well for my outlook on him. I have I think 6th, 7th round grade as well of where he's set it out to. I just disappointing final year in college and all the way down the line from the blocking, the route running. He goes to change direction and he slows down tremendously. Some of these guys we've talked about, just a guy we talked about, Jared Wiley, his ability to use his big body to block out guys. Brevin doesn't do enough of that. He sort of gives guys a pathway to the ball at times to disrupt the route. He's also not the greatest of contacted catchers. You know, you hit him as he's making the catch, the ball can get knocked out of his hands. Just he's got some physical tantalizing potential to him, and I do see him as a guy that traditionally could be an H-back that actually gives you some blocking from the H-back position. But there's just too many downsides to him as a player. I really have soured on him over the last year, especially. It just route running is subpar. He seems like he takes extra steps to make his cuts on out routes or in routes. It's like it's going to take 1 or 2 more. It's going to round it on out, which tight ends do that generally, but he really does it. And on top of being lanky and a little bit slow, Brendan, it's to me a bit of a death knell for him finding any separation at the NFL level, much less making the catch in those contested catch situations. So definitely have had to dip him down my board as well. And he's a big guy, but unfortunately, the tape has just been pretty poor lately.
Yeah, not really not too much to say here. Not interested anymore. And I wanted to be. Believe me, there's some fun stuff here, but it's
Yeah,
not enough.
it was initially last year, first turn on tape. You went, ooh, maybe here. And no, it's just not going to work. All right, let's go down to the list here. Next guy on the list is guy who's raised in some people's boards. I've got a lot of my chat. I've heard from some people that really like this guy, Tanner McClatchin out of Arizona, 6'5", 244 kid. Did you have a
Yeah.
chance to take a look at him?
Yes, I did. I think that even though he's a little bit on the smaller side right now, he's got the frame to add some weight, which I like because I think it'll make him a good inline blocker. I think he'll be a good inline blocker once he gets all that sorted out. The testing numbers tell you that he's got great speed and acceleration. His ball skills are really good. I got to watch this guy a little bit during the season because playing in the Pac-12, you catch a lot of Pac-12 games over here on the West Coast. He's got a high motor. He's good in traffic. He was productive in college. He's got almost 1,000 yards over the last 2 seasons combined. I think there is a consistency issue with him a little bit. I don't think that he's as consistent as you would like. He doesn't have the size yet to be able to play inline, so I think he's going to have to add some weight, which he can do. His route running could stand to be improved. His arms aren't that long. So there is some stuff working against him physically. But I liked Tanner McLaughlin a pretty good amount. Again, I'm a little bit concerned about Fool's Gold with the testing numbers. So I don't know. I didn't want to fall into this one, and I ended up putting like a 7th round grade on him. I didn't really get all that high up on him because, again, it just kind of feels like Fool's Gold to me. But I think there's some potential here for him to become a really good blocker.
That's what led the way with me with him a little bit as well, to get him into more of the 5th round range from where I would put him into more of the 6th or 7th round place where you set him in, Brendan, is that I think he's not only a really good blocker, I think he's a good all-around blocker. There were times last year that they used him as a sixth offensive lineman and asked him to hold up in pass protection on edges, and he was able to do that job really well. I think that the fool's gold that you bring up is right. I don't think that he's a 158 guy off a 10-yard split versus what I saw. He's got athletics, he's got a little bit of certainly some straight ahead juice there, but that's not where he was at. I do think too that teams with some of the size stuff that was there would tend to try to disrupt his route a lot and would have some success with that. Another guy that's got to get better about getting clear through traffic and not allow himself to get, held up, because the second he gets contact, he comes to a standstill, and it takes him a little bit more time to get that engine turned back on and rev back up to get back into his route. And so if he got disrupted, it sort of took him out of the play, I thought, Brendan, in a way that had me a little bit concerned. But I think his blocking is going to translate to the next level. I think he's got enough of the build-up speed, and he's got good enough hands that he can be functional there. It's a little like Barner. I think he ends up being kind of just functional, but I did put him up in the fifth round because I thought you're at least knowing that the floor of him here is a guy that's going to be able to be a really good all-around blocker who maybe you can develop into being a starting tight end for you if he can maybe add some of that weight you talked about.
Yeah, I'm not completely convinced about that floor, but you're probably right, but I don't think he was consistent enough as a blocker in college for me to feel like that.
He's certainly behind a couple of other guys in this draft that I would put ahead of him at the tight end position as a blocker. I do think, though, he's got enough of it to at least get by with it. And, but we'll see. We'll see on that one with him. All right, we got a couple of Washington tight ends to look at, but let's see if I think you maybe have been one of the last guys you checked out aside from the Washington guys would have been Dallin Holker out of Colorado State.
I do have him.
He's sort of an interesting one, isn't he?
I think he might have been the most productive tight end in the country last year in terms of like receiving yards, because Bowers got hurt. Obviously, if Bowers doesn't get hurt, he clears. But Holker, I think, had the most production for Colorado State. A little bit on the smaller side, 6'3", 241. Long arms, though. He's got nice long arms. Testing was mixed. He had a really nice broad jump, but everything else was just kind of, and three cone. Everything else was kind of forgettable. The big boards mostly put him in like the fifth round. The aggregate puts him in like the sixth. He's a good athlete in terms of like being able to move around on the football field. Like his change of direction skills are really good. He's got a big catch radius because of his long arms. A lot of versatility in where he lines up. He lines up in the backfield, lines up in line, lines up in the slot. I think he lined up outside some. I don't know if all that's going to translate, but he was doing that at Colorado State. Great hands. He's a good blocker in space, at least, I think. Like second, third level defenders. You can have him as like the puller out in front of a guy, and I think he's good at that. He's good at bringing down balls in traffic. Areas of improvement include route running. He doesn't really have the size and strength to block in the trenches, so I don't think he'll ever be somebody who can like really play in line in the NFL. Doesn't do a lot of yards after the catch. Needs to refine some blocking technique, I think. Like sometimes he just whiffs on targets in the open field. So I like his ball skills. I like the fact that he showed so much explosiveness in his testing and his change of direction skills. So I went with the sixth round for him. I like him decently enough, but I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah, and only 1 year of really production here with the 64 catches, 700 yards. Pretty empty throughout most of the rest of his college career. I thought that he really did a good job of those long arms, Brendan, of you feel his catch radius and you feel it from the low tops of his shoes up to the jumping up and high pointing balls. Like he does a great job with his dexterity of getting to those balls and maximizing that length to where he can get and make catches that other tight ends just couldn't get to on certain balls. I thought he had a lot of really hyper athletic catches where his body can be going this way, his arms reach back that way, and he just reels it in. So I think the hands are really legitimate. I think he's got some sticky hands at that. Good swerve and body control in this route running you just talked about. I think that does show up with him where he really just has really good control out there when he moves around. The 4.78 does show up as well where it is a little slow. It's not going to be a guy that gets up to speed really fast. Even the 1.66 10-yard split shows there's a little bit of a, it's going to take that little bit of that extra beat. He is a true H-back at the next level. There's no inline upside to this guy, in my opinion. I think he's going to have a hard time creating separation with that
Right.
lack of burst and long speed. I think that that's just going to be troublesome for him. And while I like his contested catch skills, one thing we've learned about college players, Brendan, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver, if you're leaning on contested catch skills throughout college, that's going to be a hard thing to translate to the pro level. It's hard to just lean on that one attribute kind of solely. So similar place that I had him rated as well. But I do think he's a guy that might give you some catching ability in that later part of the draft. But definitely a lot of places to kind of clean up and only that 1 year of production.
Right.
All right, let's move on to two of the Washington Husky tight ends that are in this draft, and two guys that maybe potentially with Grubb's background and history with them, being guys that are going to be later on in this draft, Brendan, but maybe guys that he takes a look at. We've got first off Jack the clutch one Westover coming in here. The guy, whenever the Huskies needed a big catch last year, seemed to be the guy showing up on the spot for him. I mean, not made a lot of them, but it seems like any catch he made was a big catch, didn't it?
Yeah, it kind of did. And that's not to say he's making like triple coverage catches in the back of the end zone. He's a safety valve. He's a third down, fourth down receiver, safety valve option. And he's really good at that. He's really good at like finding the hole in the zone and sitting down in it and waiting for the ball to come to him. He's actually a pretty good route runner, I think. I like his route running. Most of his routes are very simple, but I think he's good at like cutting at the top of his route. I think he's good at getting in and out of his breaks. So that's mainly what you're getting with Westover. He doesn't really have the size to play in line, doesn't really have the size to be a great blocker. Overall, I don't think he's a great blocker, even on a technical level. He's not making plays after the catch. He's not a great athlete. He's not going to run any like routes down the field for you. But there is certainly a place in the world for a Jack Westover, and it probably is as a third tight end on a NFL team.
Yeah, if Jacob Hollister can make it in this league for 6-7 years, why can't Jack Westover? You know. I think those guys give you somewhat of a similar kind of skill set to what they bring to the table. And I got to say, I walked in with Westover thinking, okay, it'll just be this guy that's like, try hard, doesn't give you a lot. I actually thought there's a little bit there with him. Does he need 2 more inches and about 20 more pounds? Yeah, you probably could use that. Is your assessment on him with the yak stuff, right? But even with the yak, like he doesn't give you yak, but he does a good job of, he'll make the catch and always feel the leverage of the defender to where he ensures he's falling forward 3 or 4 more yards on the tackle, where he's kind of getting that little grind out. It's not anything that's like dynamic in it, but just he has an understanding of how to feel that leverage, make the catch, and quickly kind of get going forward. I thought he was a high effort blocker, and he does a pretty good job in that realm. I didn't think he's great, but he does a good functional job, certainly worthy enough to me to be, if you're talking about drafting in the 6th, 7th round, a guy like Eric Hall that we talked about versus this guy and what he gives you. Go, wow, if Eric Hall is a guy that you can take in the 7th round, why shouldn't this guy, be taken as well? He's not the sharpest route runner, a little slow off the snap, especially when he was placed in line. But I thought that he provided an okay overall skill set and a very athletic pass catcher. He had a lot of tough, high degree of difficulty catches where Penix would throw it away from him, where he'd have to really go and, pull back for that ball, going backwards here. And like you said, on some of those being 3rd and 4th down catches where it's like, hey, the game's on the line. You got to make this catch or this game's not happening here in this moment. And you could just see him giving like his whole spirit up over to the catch, like I will make this catch no matter what kind of,
Yeah, absolutely.
kind of vibe off of him. So I actually like this guy. You get him in the 7th round as your 3rd tight end. I think he ends up finding his way on an NFL roster, and he finds his way into probably playing a little bit in this league.
Yeah, I don't feel like he's got the physical profile to actually get drafted. I do feel like he's a UDFA, but a priority UDFA maybe.
Certainly possible he could drop out of that place. The one thing I do is I do go back and look at some of these ties in this draft, and it is such a weak class, Brendan, and you got to figure maybe that need might end up driving this a little bit later on. But he will be an interesting case study to see where he does end up landing at. Did you see any of his times today? Did he test out at the
I didn't see. Let me see if I can look that up real quick here. But well, I don't know if that's from today or not, but I'm seeing a 4.75.
Oof,
that might be an estimate. That might be an estimate from a previous time or something. Yeah, that's not from his pro day. I don't think he ran at his pro day.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, well, he's definitely UDFA if he doesn't run his pro day then, because he needs a 4.6. He needs a 4.55. Just at least kind of lock him in there. But
yeah,
interesting player. Well, let's go here with the other Husky, who's the guy that did test at the combine. Actually, was the guy that was maybe the best overall, not overall tester, but one of the better testers, I guess, at the combine, and not highly used. But I don't know as much about the background on Culp. What kept Devin Culp, before we get into who he's a player, Brennan, you being a guy that's watched Huskies for the last couple of years and live stream the games every week on that. What kept Culp off the football field? Like, how come he couldn't, from a physical standpoint, go, oh, he should surpass Westover?
Penix threw him a lot of fastballs that he dropped because Penix, he's slinging it in there with some heat on it all the time. And Culp, his hands weren't quite up to it, I felt like. Dropped a lot of passes, a lot of routine passes, theoretically. Now, Penix maybe made them not so routine because it's a fastball. But, he also doesn't really have change of direction skills. He's got straight line speed. Not a blocker at all. Also, not really an inline blocker at all. Obviously, very undersized. He's 6'3", 231. That's beyond pushing it. I think you've kind of broken it at that point.
It's
a lot to ask. I think Hollister weighed more than that.
Yeah, probably. Oh yeah, he's probably 240 at least.
Yeah. So you also had Penix, who really liked to push the ball down the field, and Penix doesn't use the middle of the field hardly at all. So that makes it a little bit less likely a tight end's going to have success in your offense. And you've got phenomenal receivers as well. So I think all those things contributed. But he's got pretty good. His highlight reel is nice. He's got the highlight reel of a much better tight end. Some of those catches, that's the thing. Like, he makes the highlight reel catches and then drops the easy ones. He blocks in space fairly well. I'll say that. He's not a good inline blocker, but he can block in space like a lead fullback. So I'm kind of on the fence. I ultimately think he's probably a UDFA, just not enough production, too many drops. But I will admit that the 40 time was kind of eye-popping and definitely gets your attention in a way that I was not expecting.
Yeah, I think the thing that you mentioned, though, is that if you're 231, then okay, that's fine. NFL will allow those guys through and you can find a spot. But now you got to have good hands. You got to be a great pass catcher. And that's the part you talked about with him fighting his hands. It's what you feel like on every catch. And that's the way I like to put it with those guys, where you can just feel them like, here comes the catch, and you can just feel them like they're arguing with their hands as the catch is coming in. And then they'll try to make the catch where it's not fluid and easy, and he's a natural receiver of the ball. And that's the part I worry about. Is I do think, like you say, he's a willing blocker, and he'll get into the second level and do some of that stuff, but he's not good enough as a blocker to where he doesn't have that pass catching ability to lean back on at that undersized spot that he's at. And so I do think that he does get to that undrafted rookie free agent side of it, because the highlights are the highlights, no doubt about it. But you can feel with certain guys when it's just not there with the hands naturally with him. Just not a natural pass catcher, more of an athlete for the position, I would say.
Yeah, I almost wonder if he could move to receiver, drop a little bit of weight, maybe try your hand at receiver.
Then those bad hands don't get any better out there, though, and that ball doesn't come in any less.
Special teams gunner.
There you go. He's the linebacker. How about that? He's at 6'3", 244. That'd be a hell of a linebacker deal at that size.
Yeah, that could work.
Well, did you have a chance? So we've got a couple other guys I've looked at here. I don't want to go too far in the list, though, if you haven't gone down. These are all going to be 7th round guys, so maybe not worthy of a ton of discussion. Did you have any other guys on your list that we haven't gone over?
I did look at some of the other guys that you mentioned, like Eurosec was somebody that we talked about a little bit during the season, and I did go into him just a little bit. I like his hands. I think his acceleration is good. I like the way he comes off the ball. I like the way he comes off the snap. But not a blocker, only ran a handful of different routes at what was he, Stanford? Yeah, Stanford. Right. And overall, I'd say probably draftable, but not by much.
He's interesting too. He's a really productive tight end for 3 years there. So he's got a little bit more of a track record than some of these other guys. I loved his catch concentration. I felt like he gets locked in the ball, and it's like he's going to stay glued in the ball in flight. He's going to track it perfectly right. But is he more of a receiver was my thing with him. H-back is obviously his future if he's going to have a future at the tight end position, but they lined him up at wide receiver a lot even, I felt like. That's a guy that is maybe stuck in that tweener state a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, he was fairly productive last year at Stanford. I think. I think I even called him out in one of our monthly college football checkups as a riser at the tight end position.
Definitely a guy I thought that was going to maybe get a little bit more love in this post draft. I mean, having that 3 years of production for some of the others, but you don't hear a lot of him spoken about. I will say though that I do have him. I think I've got a 5th round grade on him right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I do think he's that production. I think gives you an all around skill set. I'm worried a little bit as a blocker. I'm worried he's a little bit maybe just too much receiver, but interesting player.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm gonna get to like my big board, and then a lot of these guys I put like a 7th round grade on, I'm gonna put in the 5th because there aren't enough guys to go around. You know, it's not a super deep draft at the bottom, so there's a good chance I'm gonna get down there and I'm gonna be like, oh, this guy who I thought wasn't gonna get drafted, he's definitely gonna get drafted because there aren't enough guys better than him.
The scarcity of the position. That there just isn't a lot of good prospects. So some guys are going to get drafted who maybe don't quite deserve, or if you do somewhat deserve to be drafted, you'll really be drafted then at that point. But this is a guy that might be certainly a guy, if he got picked even in the late 4th, might be a guy some team slides into thinking that's can be like that Parkinson guy who's got a little coming from Stanford too. That similar background. Remember Parkinson 240. He's gotten up to I think 260 now. You know, I'll add that 20 pounds to this kid. When I add that 20 pounds, he'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah, but Parkinson was 6'7" or something, right? Like he had a frame that could add the weight.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's the truth there. So
yeah. What else do we have? A Caden Presscorn. I liked his open field running. I think he's got a good yard after the catch game. I like his hands. I like his ability to make contested catches. Route running was good, but not enough speed to threaten defenses deep, and not a good blocker. Kind of probably never going to be a good blocker either. So even though he's a little bit on the bigger side, I thought he played a little bit soft in some regards when it came to blocking stuff. So yeah, that's what I had there.
100% agree on your assessment with that. Applauding tight end off the ball, 7th round. This should be an undrafted rookie grade for me. The more tape I watched with Caden, the worse it got for me. The more I got just to the point where I don't see it with this guy. I don't think he's got the athleticism or the juice to make it happen. And I don't think he's going to end up even catching on at the pro level myself.
Yeah, believable.
How about Bryant Nesbitt out of North Carolina?
Bryson Nesbitt, he was a guy I had high expectations for this year, and it never really went that way, did it? I thought playing with Drake May, he was going to maybe become like Drake May's number 1 guy, and didn't really happen. That being said, I like his route running. I like his short area quickness as well. I think he'll be able to I think he'll be able to create separation, and the straight line speed is pretty good. But his releases off the line of scrimmage are not very good. He's a little bit slow. Sometimes he gets held up. And he's definitely not got the size. He's got some weight to gain if he wants to really pull this off here. So, I don't know. Probably draftable, but not by much.
Yeah, he's dipped to my 7th round as well. Long striding H-back. Really did most of his damage up the seams. It just watching the tape, didn't do much catching out, didn't do much in the field. Just like he'd run right up the seam route on a go route, and the quarter, May would just kind of throw it up and use his big body to try to, attack the coverage and undersized defenders he was going up against. Didn't give me a whole lot other than that, Brendan, off of what I saw from the tape of him. He's not been tremendously productive. You talked about having May there. Remember as well with May that he was missing Tez Watkins, I think it is, or whatever that guy's name is, the Tez Walker, sorry. Guy was gone for half the year. This guy started out with only, 10 catches through the first 4 games, where it's like, you should be featured, you should be showing up, you should be a part of this integral part of this offense at this point, and he just wasn't. He's got some good overall skill as far as a blocker goes, so he can give you a little bit of blocking. It's not great, but it's okay. He's got strength and tenacity that show up in that side of this game, but I just don't think there's a lot of upside here to this kid when you really boil down. I don't think he's fast enough or quick enough to be great as a pass catcher, and I don't think he's ferocious enough or strong enough as a blocker to really give you much impact from the position.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
All right, let's go to the final guy we've got here on the list, and that would be Oronde Gadsden. Yeah,
that's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one all the way around on that one.
Looking at that name makes me feel like I'm dyslexic or something. Like
I
something's
know.
wrong.
I know. These names are getting harder and harder to pronounce, man.
Yeah. I didn't do a ton with him. I did have my eye on him before the season started. I mean, 223. That's tough to overcome, right? That's kind of a showstopper.
He's a receiver more than he's a tight end. That's really the
Yeah.
bottom line with him.
Good yards after the catch. Pretty good possession receiver. He's tall. He's got long arms, I think. Got pretty good hands, good route runner. Doesn't understand how to get open against zone very well, though. I don't feel like he creates a lot of separation. And I mean, I don't even need to say it, right? He can't block. You're not going to be able to block anybody
Yeah.
at 223. So probably not draftable. I can't imagine him getting drafted. He got hurt last year too, right? Didn't he miss most of the season?
I think he was injured a lot of the year as well on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think 223, we're getting into funny money place. We're talking about these guys as tight ends. That's just too light. And he's got a great big catch radius at 6'5". I mean, that shows out and he uses it. But just not a lot there to think is you got some upside as a tight end. He's not good enough. I mean, we got a draft that's stocked deep with wide receivers, Brendan. I mean, it might take us 4 hours to get through the damn receivers. He's not good enough to even compete with those guys on that side of it. I think he's going to have a hard time landing in this league when it's all said and done. And 223 is just too light, not fast enough or quick enough to be able to think you're going to add 15 pounds to him and he's not going to lose anything at that point. He'll be just fine. He doesn't have that kind of build that he's rolling. So, yeah, tweener, stuck in between, not the best of both worlds. And unfortunately, that's going to prevent him from really having any upside in the league, I think, unfortunately. But those would be your tight ends, folks, in this draft. So we've got our grades through. We got Bowers as the first round tight end. Sinnott and I've got Sinnott and Sanders as second round tight end. Brendan thinks maybe a little bit of Sinnott might be more third roundish. Then we've got a collection of our next couple of guys where I think you get into that's your sort of top stock with those three up there, Brendan. I think it'd be fair to say, and then say, well, then you got Tip Ryman, Cade Stover, Theo Johnson. And maybe like an AJ Barner is kind of your next collection beneath that.
Yeah, it all kind of blends together at that point.
Yeah. It certainly is not a lot of separation between those guys once you get past the top of the stock in this draft with these guys. So it's not an exciting group. It's got some talent at the top. If you got the good guys, you got to get them early because if you go late, you're getting more of a third. I mean, we need a third tight end. So there's a good chance we take that third tight end in this draft, but that's what that guy will be at that point.
Yeah, and it might not even be in the draft. It might be a UDFA. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we just went like, hey, Jack Westover, come on over.
Yeah, 100%. Well, he's going to be super cheap at that point too, Brendan. So that certainly is a draw to waiting at that point. And maybe that's the tack that Schneider takes. Is he goes to one of these UDFAs. Because remember, one of the things with the draws with getting the UDFAs is you're getting a guy that says, well, do you have an opening for me? Not just merely that you want him, but do you have the pathway for me to actually make the roster so my NFL career, my football career is not over with? You'd be able to provide that with one of these UDFAs. And not bad guys in the UDFAs. Culp, Westover, Holker, right? I mean, even spann-ford as a UDFA, I'm not necessarily minding that at that point as the third tight end. So all those guys would be intriguing on that side of it. Oh, Arande's returning to Syracuse. Okay,
oh, really?
Thank you, East Coast Gridiron. Thank you for mentioning that on that one.
Okay.
So
he needs to. It's a good decision by him.
And some of these guys made these calls late, so it wasn't always easy to. They waited till like the very last part of the process of announcing they're going back to school. So, but good to hear. Good to hear on Gadsden. Thank you for the update on that, you guys. Well, we are going to be back here on Tuesday. So we will be bouncing back here on Tuesday to take a look at the running backs. And folks, we will be getting up a Tuesday, Thursday show of the B&B show leading all the way up to the draft. As well in the draft, we'll be doing B&B shows on each of the nights of the end of the draft. So you'll be getting a lot of B&B over the next month here as we do concentrate on this. If you guys could do me this favor and do please hit the like button on this video. If you're over on Seahawks, Brendan Nelson, or over here on the Hawks Nest, please do make sure as well that you do get subbed up to either channel and both channels at the same time as we do these shows twice a week throughout the season as well. In addition to that, so we will be back at 7:00 Tuesday, Brendan.
That sounds good to me. I'm down for it. Basically, April is going to be a 2-stream a week month.
2-stream a week month. And we will be looking at backs, which much like the tight end, you might think, well, we don't back, but you do need maybe technically a third tight end right now as it stands. You do need right now technically a fourth running back for the
Mhm.
roster as it currently stands with DJ Dallas for leaving.
Yeah,
So
I would say that's more likely than tight end, because with tight end, you could put George Fant as your third tight end. You don't really have anybody you could put as like a fourth running back right now. It would be
Roderick Thompson,
yeah,
Roderick.
Brian Kobach.
Brian Kobach. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. We definitely got some room to upgrade that position. And the nice thing with this bet is it's not a deep class of running backs, but I think there's going to be a good grouping of backs in that 5th to 7th round range of things where you might be able to get yourself a pretty good player at that point if you're grabbing in that range.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate you guys for watching tonight. Do again, please hit that like button if you could for me, very much so. Thank you, Brendan, for hanging on through here on the show on this and doing these extra shows throughout this month. I appreciate you for that.
Thank you for doing it with me, man. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It's that time of year, man. Anything is possible. And if your Hawks can continue to fit up to what they've done the last 2 drafts, we are going to get this team turned around very fast to the right direction of things. So if John just keep building on these last 2 drafts, operating from a point of value, these Seahawks can get back again to contender state sooner, much sooner than later. Well, thank you, Brandon, for doing the show. Thank you all for watching. And thank you to everybody as well for all the donations in the channel, from Kevin Mullen, Jordan, Jeffrey Thistle, Garth Knight, Noah Lansing, Kodad, and Eric Toms, and Zen Lunatic. Thank you so much to all of you guys for all of your support to the channel. We'll be back in just a couple days. But until that time, please, by God, don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.